I got a Bluetooth headset here, but I don't like it.
I only like it
I
because
like
you can walk
cords.
around when you're doing shit.
Yeah, that is nice, but how I see it is like when I was born, I didn't have an umbilical Bluetooth. I had a cord. So it's just the natural state of being, really.
Hey guys, welcome to Cinema Chats episode 4. We took a week off because I'm an idiot and I didn't know that there was 5 weekends this October.
I-
So,
I'm you don't have to cover for me. I couldn't record because I had constipation.
yeah. Um I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah, I
But
appreciate that, but it's good just to be transparent.
yeah, well, I also didn't want to announce that we recently lost our sponsorship with Adidas over some comments. I don't want to go into detail, but needless to say, some people were not happy with our opinion of the slaughtered lamb sequence in American Werewolf in London. I don't know who. Their name might rhyme with Landis. I'm not sure, but you can read into that as you will. So we had to take a week off for security reasons and for legal stuff. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I didn't know there was the 5 weeks, and we only want to do 4 episodes a month. So we said, screw it, let's take 1 week off, and then we'll come back and we'll do our final. So I guess this is like the Halloween special because this is right before Halloween weekend, and we're gonna upload it on Halloween weekend. I even have
Yeah.
Pumpkin here for production design. Um, we increased our budget recently.
That is a designer pumpkin too.
Yeah. Yes.
That is the Gucci pumpkin.
Yeah. Yeah, it was unfortunately the designer who made this was also recently dropped for comments that cannot be discussed publicly on this podcast. We're going to talk about Phantasm, which is a movie that we both dig a lot. We dig the franchise, well, I'm not going to
Mhm.
say all the Phantasm movies. Uh, I do we count Ravenger?
I consider it a fan film that got the original cast. So it's like a cousin once removed or something. It's not like immediate family, but it's in the bloodline.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so we'll just say the first 4 Phantasm movies to keep it pure.
Yeah.
Um
Be careful, we might lose more sponsorships.
yeah. We have to keep the Phantasm bloodline pure. If you know what I mean. So we're just gonna talk about the original one here, even though I totally like rock with Phantasm 2, 2 and 3. Watched them a lot as a kid. We're gonna talk about the first one. It's gonna wrap up the series. Directed by Con. I was gonna say Con Dossarelli.
Kanye West,
Yeah, Kanye West. Don Coscarelli. This was a breakout feature for
Donda
him.
Coscarelli.
Don. No, you can't be in my horror movie. Um, yeah, Kid Cudi was originally in this, but then got dropped off of it. So we're gonna talk about Don Coscarelli's breakout feature because I don't know if this was his first movie. I do think he actually made something before this
He
movie.
made Kenny and Company, I think it was called.
That's correct. Yes. Look at the brain on Chad.
Yeah.
Uh,
What I love is I have the old Anchor Bay DVD release, so it has previews for other Coscarelli movies before Phantasm, and it
right.
always has that Kenny and Company trailer. I've never seen the movie, but I love speculating every time I watch. Like, I wonder what that's like.
That's a great
It's probably a
title.
masterpiece.
We're gonna watch Kenny and Company sometime.
We'll review it.
Yeah, we'll do a Kenny and Company episode. Okay,
Definitely Chad,
so I
Chad and
guess
Company.
the first question to go into, because I have the Wikipedia up, so this is going to be like a previous episode where I'm going to use this for information. Although I know a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
already. Um,
I've never seen the movie. I just have the Wikipedia up, so.
that would be great. Just talk about movies you haven't seen. I was going to do that with a friend. We were going to review Obi-Wan, and he hadn't seen any of it, and he was just going to come on a podcast with me and give it a positive review, just based off the things I said. I was just going to
You know
talk
what
about.
sucks? Is when you do play that devil's advocate for a movie you haven't seen. You don't pretend you've seen it, but you know what I mean? You just like say the counterpoint, and then you watch the movie and you're like, oh no, all those defenders were just wrong.
Yeah.
That's how Halloween Ends was for me. It was like a week of people saying, no, it's misunderstood. If you look at it this way instead of the fanboy way. And I was like, yeah, this will play out that way. And you watch and it's immediately just bad.
Yeah, no. Well, that reminds me of us years ago. We reviewed A Fault in Our Stars when it came
Mhm.
out, and we gave it a negative review, but we weren't like harsh on it. But we gave it a negative review overall. But remember at the time
Yeah.
we liked Ansel Elgort, which is funny to me now. But at the time we were like, hey, this
Yeah.
Ansel Elgort guy, he's great.
Too bad about his name.
Oh, it's the
I think that held
worst.
him back.
But we gave it a negative review, and if you know, it's like the movie about it's Breakfast Club with cancer, basically, and then a love story with
Cancer
cancer.
Club.
Yeah, the Cancer Club.
The
And
Chemo Club.
I was dating a girl at the time, and her father had died of cancer recently. And this girl was very attractive, I thought, very out of my league at the time. Sort of looked like Rashida Jones. And then we went out to eat on like our first date, and she talked about how much she loved that movie because she was like a 20-year-old girl. And I remember praising it, doing that thing we talked about. Like I was fake liking the movie, and I was finding a way to be positive about it. And then she somehow found my YouTube channel where we had reviewed A Fault in Our Stars, and then I hung out with her again, and she's like, "Yeah, I watched your video, and you're saying different things than what you said to me." And that relationship did not work out,
Yeah,
needless to
you're just like,
say.
I was playing a character in the video. I was playing a stupid jerk who doesn't understand
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah, well, if I had known that that video was gonna like not get me laid, like it was gonna cock block me, talk about, I would have like masterpiece, it would have just a
Yeah.
lesson, people. The internet things don't die. It's not like back in the
No.
day. Like you're like, oh, I sent this dick pic, it'll be fine, you know, and then it comes back around.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question, because I'm gonna say fuck talking about when you first saw this movie. I grew up on this franchise. My father was a fan of the
It's
Phantasm
fun.
franchise. So I don't know when I first saw Phantasm. I've seen Phantasm like 100 times.
For me,
All
it's
of the
it's
movies.
actually one of my most memorable first time watches.
Oh,
I
my
have a
bad.
very vivid memory.
Okay, well then
Oh,
tell
it's all
me.
good.
No, tell me
Okay,
about
yeah.
it.
So what used to happen is I'd stay at my grandparents' house a lot. I lived in like Farmville. Uh, and I remember I was helping my grandfather pay. I don't think he was paving his driveway, but doing something with it. I was helping him. And so as a reward, they took me to the store, to the local mall to get a movie. And I knew about Phantasm from I think it was called Maniacs or something like that. It was some VHS tape. It was like a compilation tape of the most famous scenes in different horror movies. And I knew the scene where was it Mike? Yeah, because I was saying A. Michael Ball. I was like, his name's not A in the movie. What the hell's his name in the movie? Mike. When he's in bed and he gets pulled by the Jawas and the tall man standing over his bed was always a really creepy scene. And I saw that Anchor Bay had just released it, and I was starting to like appreciate them as a DVD company. So I took it home and I watched that with my brother and cousin, and it was immediately. I remember it was immediately, and I never had this before except one other time where I was like, "Is this my favorite movie?" I enjoyed it so much, and my brother and cousin really enjoyed it, and it became like a real bonding thing with my brother and I growing up on these movies, watching them together all the time. But I've just never had a movie resonate with me as strongly as Phantasm on a first time watch before.
I like you bringing up the image of them getting pulled with the Jawas because I remember that very little. Because I think Phantasm 2 is my first memory of this franchise. I remember that one much more as a little kid, with 2 and 3, and then I think more I realized it. It's sort of like Evil Dead. I saw Army of Darkness way before I saw Evil Dead 1 and
I saw
2.
Army of Darkness first as well.
And
It was only like,
it totally works too. Like I remember loving Army
yeah,
of Darkness for years before I even knew that there was an Evil Dead franchise.
yeah. I saw like Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 1, then Evil Dead 2 last.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. I had the same thing. I watched them like 2 nights in a row, the first and second one.
Well,
And I
I have
remember
a
I hate
question
to say
for
it, I
you.
was kind of disappointed in them at the time because I was thinking they were going to be like Army of Darkness.
Yeah. If a woman tells you she hasn't seen Evil Dead 2 yet, do you think that means that she wants to see it? But I mean, it's been around forever. She would have seen it by now if she wanted to see it, right?
See, the yet bothers me, right? It makes me think. Like either she, is considering to do it like you say, or she's just like saying that to give you like this optimism that, it hasn't happened yet with somebody else.
Yeah.
You come home and she's watching Evil Dead 2 with your brother.
Get the shotgun.
Your brother's on the couch. Sorry, Chad.
Like, Chad, how could you?
Chad, I'm sorry, Chad. Chad, how could you?
Chad, you're in bed with my brother. Chad.
Yeah. Dad comes home, Dad, Chad. Boys, Dad, Chad, Dad. Oh, so we decided that we're gonna become alcoholics and start drinking on this show. This is
Yeah,
Chill
this is our
Vibes.
first time ever drinking.
I've never tried alcohol before.
We thought we'd try it as an experiment on the
Yeah.
show.
We thought we're men now. We can do
Yeah,
this.
we're 18.
Yeah, I've grown up. I don't look like a child in this like drug hoodie and a pumpkin beside me or anything like that. If I was just pulling candy out, it's just an endless supply. I'm drinking because this was the only IPA near me. I'm not in Ohio anymore, where it was like, it was like fucking Narnia of like, craft beers.
There's like a brewery on every street
Oh, it
corner.
was insane. My friend from California came out to Ohio, and he was even like, "This is the most I've ever seen of just like every gas station, every grocery store, every corner. There's just
Yeah.
craft beers." So I'm drinking. I think it's called Beer Hug. Yeah, I'm drinking the Neon Beer Hug. There's also
Oh,
the.
yeah, I've had that. I have. They have the worst fucking commercials ever. I got it because I hate the commercials so much.
Well, I thought they would. I remember when I took a trip to Tennessee recently. It was probably the first time maybe I had these years ago, but we went to on a trip and I went and got a case of these and I thought it was terrible. I mean, don't get me wrong, it had that typical IPA taste where like you have to drink
Yeah,
two. But honestly, this time around, they're pretty good.
I like them.
Yeah, and 7%. So I can't complain. What are you drink? I see what you're drinking.
Yeah.
What you can announce.
I'm drinking this beer called Budweiser. It advertised to be king of beers, and I thought that sounded like an awfully Chad-like drink, so I thought I would try that for my first.
Dude, that's got to be the best ad like or sponsor to have.
I think that's half the reason I buy them so much is because I see the marketing, the package, how it's
Yeah.
got like the design. It looks like a dollar bill or something, and I just look and it says King of Beers. And like, why would I buy anything else?
They got me that with the Miller High Life where it says the champagne of
Oh
beers.
yeah,
See
no,
that?
that's so good.
It's like, you're like, I'm gonna be classy tonight. This is $9 for a 12-pack of bottles. If I
It's
pour
so
it in a
funny because it's
glass.
like you see it's like this champagne of beers. Like I want to drink the champagne of beers.
Yeah, no, when I drink it, like Kanye West, The Good Life starts playing, like I'm just like, wow,
Yeah,
wow,
you're like
wow, wow.
popping it.
Yeah. No, that was a thing for months in Ohio because it wasn't just because it was the cheapest beer. Like, it's insane how cheap Miller High Life. They should just do beer
Mm,
cast. Fuck
that'd be fun.
movies.
Speaking of Miller High Life, I remember I was living with a friend that I have another venture with at the time temporarily, and an ex-girlfriend called me, and she was saying I've been acting erratically because I'd started drinking. And I said, I've always been erratic, but you weren't always a cunt.
There goes the
And I
monetization
still
on this
quote
one.
that. Whoops.
Did I tell you? Sorry. I think I texted you this. I have an ad blocker on my computer, but I was watching our last
Oh
episode
yeah.
on the phone, and the ads that pop up are like workout stuff. It's this dude that's like curly with one arm, and he's like, "Stop working out on a treadmill to lose weight." And then they have like the sponsor cards at the bottom, and those are like it's like workout supplements. It's like for the Joe Rogan experience or something. And it's
We
just
could be the
because
Joe Rogan of movie discussion.
that's true. Yeah, we just we say the N word 12 times. We compare black people to apes. All the things they attacked him for, they were all like, "Oh, there's context for this." Like
No, when you put it that way, it sounds pretty bad.
all of the context, but then that one, were the one where he's just saying they're the apes. I'm like, I don't know, Joe. He's just like, it's like Planet of the Apes. I'm like, holy shit. I don't know if Nick Mullen would say that.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's like one time he was on a couch with John Mulaney. I remember there's a YouTube video of it's Nick Mullen, John Mulaney, and some other comedian, and they're watching John Mulaney stand. By the way, I fucking hate John Mulaney's stand up. I think he's like easily one of the most
yeah.
overrated, acclaimed comics. But he's on there doing these black voices, like, "No, I don't think about that. What you think?" And like Nick Mullen's like, "I don't even think I would say this." It was
It
like,
is funny because there's such a context there with the joke and how you present it. That's like Nick can get away with it because the whole thing's this tightrope walk of doing something offensive. So it's got that grade school thing of like doing something naughty, which makes it funny. But then like what Joe said, or yeah, what you're saying about John Mulaney, it just seems very like dated.
Yeah, yeah, like Joe Rogan's old. Well, that's a lot of Joe Rogan stuff. I mean, it's served him
Hmm.
well that he's from like old media. That's why he's been able to make, I think, that transfer. Because
Yeah.
because really all Rogan's doing is like a '90s radio show. It's just the
I'm just gonna
podcast
call him
version.
out. I'm sorry. I'm calling him out right now. It's nepotism.
Yeah.
The only reason he got a podcast is because he's related to the guy in Green Day. He's his cousin. So they gave him a fucking show, and everybody goes on his show. It's like, oh, he's like John Green Day's brother or whatever. I'll go talk to him. And then he spouts conspiracy theories and says fucked up shit, comparing black people to animals and all that, or whatever he does on his show. And it's disgusting.
So anyway, Phantasm.
Yeah,
Um.
good
Oh,
movie.
so I guess let's just jump into it. Fuck it. Like I'm not, I'm sitting here
Yeah.
thinking like, how do I
Well,
approach
Phantasm's not a
this?
structured movie.
No, it's
I
not.
don't know if it makes sense to approach it like
Yeah.
here's scene one, here's scene two. It's
Yeah.
really a lucid dream of a film.
Well, the first two movies we did, I think, have very defined structures. Like, I think
Yeah.
Scooby Doo on Zombie. Well, maybe not Rob Zombie's Halloween. I guess it does have a structure, though. It's just,
Yeah, it's just a bad one.
yeah, it's poorly executed, but it's like, kid gets bullied, goes to sane asylum, comes back to attack people in town that he was from years
Hmm.
later. American Werewolf. But yeah, this is, I think, even more so than Nightmare on Elm Street or like Inception or a lot of movies that deal
You know
with
what the movie's closest to me?
what?
This isn't a joke. Annie Hall.
I get what you mean. Well,
Because
it's very
both
70s too. It's the 70s element adds to that. The experiment
both
of
were 3 hour
editing.
movies cut
Yeah.
down. Yeah, I think they both really show in that way where they feel like collections of moments. But whereas Annie Hall has the reflections, the memories aspect on a relationship, Phantasm feels like fragments of a dream where you wake up the next morning after a crazy night of dreaming. And you're like, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And you're trying to explain it to someone, and it kind of loosely connects, but doesn't quite click. That's how Phantasm works for me.
Well, the first movie in particular is that way. I mean, I think all of the I think Oblivion tries to really do that too with how it's put together.
Yeah.
But the second and third one, I would say, are much more like conventional, like action movies. I think they have like a buddy comedy action adventure element to them.
Yeah.
And it's more Bubba Hotep, Don Coscarelli than it is what the first Phantasm is. But I agree with you. The thing that's strange about the first movie, which is odd that we even picked it for this, to be honest, is it's a hard film to be analytical about or to have like a straightforward discussion about because every time I watch it, I find the film so interpretive in single sequences too. It's not even just. I don't think it's a coincidence that there's Dune stuff in here and that David Lynch does Dune a few years later. I think there's a lot of parallels to
Yeah.
certain filmmakers. I think this the only thing I compare it to, I guess, is House Sue. I think is sort of in this ballpark, but there's a lot of predating Sam Raimi stuff in here. There's a lot of Tim Burton stuff in here, especially like I think about the fingers getting cut off in the blood. That's very Tim Burton, very Pee Wee, very Beetlejuice, sort of stuff with the humor. And then it's also got stuff that would be sort of the meta commentary stuff that would be played up later in horror films. There's a lot of Wes Craven here, but it's like he's kind of figuring out some of the Wes Craven things before Wes Craven transitions from The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left into this 80s version of himself. And the odd thing with Coscarelli is that he didn't become one of the main guys in that group. All of those other guys went on to, basically become A-list directors at one point or another in their careers. And this is still Don Coscarelli's like biggest success, as this movie cost $300,000 and made like $20 million in the late '70s at like drive-ins and late night screenings.
Yeah, going back to the comparisons, I think it actually going back to Lynch has a lot in common with something like Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway. And his Lynch's whole theory on connective tissue and how you don't need plot threads to carry a film, you just need the connective tissue. I think that really plays in here, and I think that not intentionally, because obviously how could anybody anticipate this? But I think Costerly really leaned into that before it was a thing.
Well, I don't want to it's hard to discuss this, but like I don't want to accuse him of things because there's a lot of debate over this movie, right? Because my
Mhm.
one story, because who I'd have liked to meet obviously is Reggie Bannister, but I did meet Michael Baldwin at a convention, and I remember when I was there, everybody kept telling me don't bring up Phantasm 2. He hates when you bring up It was like a warning, like don't bring up Phantasm 2 around Michael Baldwin. He'll get
It, like, turns
angry.
into a werewolf.
Yeah, it was scary. You know, he's there by the fucking Alex Vincent from Child's Play. You know, it was a scary thing. It was like anything
They're
could happen.
intimidating guys.
Yeah, it is funny. Alex Vincent, he's a fucking asshole. He's like 5 foot tall, and in real life, and then I remember on Facebook we would get in arguments after that convention. But he's just this little fucking asshole.
You know who he
Uh
reminds me of? This is a weird comparison. Will Wheaton. I get
oh,
Will Wheaton vibes from him.
same energy, yeah, totally. Except Will
Yeah.
Wheaton gave a good performance in a movie as a child.
Yes.
I'll say that too, because that's the thing when you talk to him, it's hard to be like, "You were so great in that movie." With Child's Play, you want to be like, remember that movie where you gave a terrible performance, but like the guy
That's
voicing the
true.
doll, everyone else is good in it. The mom, the cop, but like you fucking suck. You're a terrible kid actor in it.
Remember that movie you're famous for? You didn't totally ruin it.
Yeah, yeah. Were you the worst part of that iconic movie? Like everybody knows Chucky, and you're the lead character. When he gives a
You
shit
got
about
outacted by plastic.
you. Child's Play would be a fun episode to do at some point,
Yeah.
the original, just to like talk about that. Because there's things that fall in here, but I met him, and everyone kept warning me and telling me like, and I kept hearing rumors. You hear rumors when you go to conventions, like Peter Mayhew's was an asshole apparently, Chewbacca, and you hear so when you go to cons a lot, people kind of warn you about who's because most of the time this is, and I don't know how this is in the modern world because conventions have been kind of corporatized and everything like that. But what a lot of people learn when you're like kind of a nerdy person is when you start to go to these things is that it's basically just a people trying to give money from you through autographs or photos.
Yeah.
That's why they don't care about talking to you. It's not some like they don't have reverence for their work. It's like a job. They're there to get paid. They
What's
almost get annoyed.
transactional?
Yeah, they're almost annoyed when you try to have a conversation. They're like, "But you're not giving me money."
Honestly,
Um,
people are like that, and like not just celebrities, but like cashiers, family members, just anybody. It's kind of the same reaction. I don't know why. I thought that's just how people are.
it just turns out people don't like us. And he was really rude. Just an asshole. But I met him and he was super nice. It was totally opposite of what people said. He had no problem talking about Phantasm too. So I don't know what the fuck. But he had told me, now I don't know if this is true. This is the lore of these movies. This movie in particular has this where there's 20 different versions of every story. People try to take credit
Yeah.
for things. I wrote this idea. This scene was me. Who was the genius behind the success of this? Because this is always what happens when people make something and they don't become big stars. Everybody tries to take credit for that thing that was the one time that they were known for it. Instead of being like, maybe it was just crazy that we all came together and made this, which is probably the real answer. But everyone always tries to take credit. And he claimed with the Star Wars thing that Coscarelli had read the script to Star Wars and did know about it, and that they even had it on the set of it. He told me that in person. Now, once again, that could all be a lie. I have
My
no.
only question with that, though, in retrospect, is how did Costa really get the script to Star Wars?
This is what Michael Baldwin said. This is what I had heard, and this is I've heard this from Mark Hamill on podcasts, not from meeting him. Is that apparently everybody had read the script to Star Wars. It was like a big passed around script. Like, because if you
Oh, okay.
remember, Mark Hamill had this too, where Robert Englund claims he got him to audition for the part. But Mark
Hmm.
told it and said that's a nice story for him. But he's like, literally everybody knew about that movie. And he can say that he told me about it, but he's like, everybody talked about Star Wars. So I think it was just passed around because people were auditioning for it and it was a hot script.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But Michael Baldwin had claimed that there was that Coscarelli has script Star Wars. So I'm only bringing that up when you talk about the 3 hour thing versus editing it down with the Woody Allen thing with Annie Hall. I think he was trying to make, maybe not admitting this, but I think in his head he was very I think a good comparison beyond these people is George Lucas. I think there's a lot of George Lucas here, in a
Hmm.
big way. I think there's a THX 1138 element to this, especially
The White
visually.
Room, especially, yeah.
Yes, and American Graffiti. It's sort of like a George Lucas horror movie in a similar way where he kind of mixes different genre tropes with the sense of place and puts them together with these high concepts and then production value, elevating sort of cheap production values and making them look more sophisticated. And I think in his head, he was making this 3-hour film that was like this, in the way Lucas was trying to make like a comic book or these things. I think he had in his head he was making something, and obviously it probably didn't work. And then he cut it down into a 90-minute movie. Probably like, okay, we'll release this. This will be like a horror gore film, and we can release this in theaters. It'll do well at drive-ins and so on. And then I think that's what gave us Phantasm. I think in the edit, he found the surrealist elements to really flourish that, and almost the Donnie Darko thing. Oh, if I cut more stuff out, if I cut out character development, which is what
Less is more.
it's what he's claimed. He's claimed that he cut out basically all character development, and then this is what
Yeah.
became
Did you ever
Phantasm.
see there's like what 40, 50 minutes deleted from Blue Velvet? Did you ever watch those deleted scenes?
I've seen some of them. I haven't watched all of them.
I got the Criterion has them, and I got that. It actually pissed me off. I ordered the Blu-ray, but I got the DVD. Maybe I accidentally ordered the DVD, but I meant to. In any case, I got the wrong version. But I watched all the deleted scenes on that, and what's fascinating about it is the scenes are good, and you
Mhm.
see why they work in a script, but they would hurt the movie overall if they were in it. It was really like a master class in like editing, where you see why they were written, and you also see why they were cut.
I've talked about this. There's like deleted scenes in Groundhog Day, and you can look them up on YouTube, and they're like all as good as the good scenes in Groundhog Day. There's like one where Bill Murray's like pool hustling people because he's been playing pool every night. And I had a
Mhm.
theory on this: when a movie's like really working, it's jiving, even the deleted scenes are good. It's like that, Cowboy Bebop, even the filler episodes are good. Or
Mhm.
even the bad B
Netflix
tracks.
version, right?
Or even the B tracks on the album are good. That kind of attitude. So
Motion.
I think sometimes if your thing's just jiving, you're like you just have good scenes, and then it becomes like, oh, everything I have is good, but now I have to structure it. But
Exactly.
whatever you were doing though, it was just work. Be it a band or whoever, it doesn't have to be a film.
What's that cliche? Kill your darlings.
Yeah, and I think the really good art, the stuff that's not good, but stuff that's tight. The First Strokes album.
Mhm.
I'm sure they probably had 5 or 6 more songs that were good too, and they had to cut them out. But like,
Being Chads, we love tight strokes.
love him dressed just like a stoner. Start Seth Rogen live like that was really interesting. There was a funny story. It was this sums up Seth Rogen so well, where like Bill Hader said he was trying different glasses for his cop character in Superbad, and he went to Seth Rogen.
Mhm.
He's like, I don't know, what do you think? And Seth Rogen's like, I really don't give a shit. It does not fucking matter. Nobody gives a shit. It's like that's his approach. Here, Kanye West and him aren't friends anymore. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's got to be
Probably
tough for
couldn't relate.
it's got to be tough
It's
for
like having
Seth.
so much talent and none.
Seth's like looking at his like Kanye Spotify, and he's like, "What do I do?" He has it in a private folder. It's like his porn on his computer. Like someone comes over, and is like, "Wait, do you have Ye music on here?" No, no.
Well, that is the thing is that I don't know. How I see it is I love R. Kelly.
Yeah.
Not as a person, as a musician.
Oh, I thought you were saying you were a fan of the man.
No, no, he doesn't return
Oh.
my emails. So that's the thing. Like, Ye, whatever he says isn't as bad as what R. Kelly did. I like Charles Manson's music. Um,
I
I
like that.
mean,
I like we're trying to focus on Phantasm, but clearly Kanye is like in most of our minds all the.
I said something this week to someone where I said, honestly, Ye is my favorite person. Like, my mother gave birth to me. I appreciate that. Respect.
Yo, mom, thanks.
Yeah, like I'm happy for her and all, but Ye had the best life.
Yeah, there was a post Eric Andre put up about like not listening to his music anymore, and he's like, "Are your ethic and morals really, worth giving up for his? Is his music more important than that?" And one guy on like Reddit was like, "Yes." It's like, are you kidding?
Well, here's my argument.
My
Like,
morals and ethics.
how about David Bowie fucking a child? How about Led
Led
Zeppelin?
Zeppelin, yeah.
That's what John Lennon. I
I
always say,
know.
like, if you listen to Led Zeppelin, shut the fuck up.
Well, yeah, it's like all. Well, it's just the thing with it is a complex discussion about art and the artist, and it's one that's been
Yeah.
debated about forever. And maybe social media is the issue now because back when Led Zeppelin was Led Zeppelin, there was a mystique about it. There wasn't social media. So
You saw pictures of Led Zeppelin or the records, like, they might fuck kids. Maybe
this
not. It was
video is so
mysterious.
demonetized, like everything. It's like, what does this have to do with Phantasm? Where was the child fucking and Oh, you didn't catch that?
It's the subtext, idiot.
That's what they I fucking
Pay attention.
don't get Kino. Real Kino. I think this movie's interesting in the fact that it combines a lot of B movie schlock and low budget 70s stuff and then sort of a sophistication and artistic approach both at the same time. Those two sort of aesthetic
Yeah.
and genres are clashing with each other from scene to scene in this movie. And I think a lot of it might just be that it's low budget, so he didn't have resources.
But that is a secret ingredient to great art. Like, if you're like Joyce or T.S. Eliot or Picasso or any of that shit, like, it's always the marriage of high art and low art.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to
Like,
well, it makes if one thing it makes something not pretentious.
yes.
And then another thing is that if there is and I think all films to some degree or another, at least American films, I think deal with class even if it's not overt text. There's always sort of the higher up and the lower in a power structure. This is a
Yeah.
even a storytelling thing. So I think when you scale it down too, it gives the sense that you're not part of the Hollywood system. It's not about upper class. It's the blue collar man's art film.
Well, that is exactly why I love this film so much, why I think it connects with me so much. And because the film really is a labor, it's like what we used to make back in the day, where it really was, to my understanding, and I haven't read up on this in years, so I could be off. To my understanding, a lot of the movie was produced by Don Coscarelli's parents. He rented cameras over the weekend to film it over summers. I mean, it was basically a DIY indie movie just made by a guy and his local friends. And that really shows. And there's a sense of community in these movies, in this family aspect with the cast and crew that carries over throughout the series. But the first one in particular really is this little movie that could. It really is like a home video miracle.
I think that's dead on. I think that's dead. Well, I mean, the key ingredient that's Reggie Bannister, where it's a
Yeah.
friend of Coscarelli. He feels like a real person that would be a cool guy in the town that you grew up in. That's the charm of the character. But then this movie asks, in the franchise, what if you take one of those everymen, uh, well, not everyman, but a guy that would be that kind of cool, offbeat character. He'd be like
A cool uncle.
or in a town, he'd be a guy that works at like a shop that sells, incense. Him being an ice cream man. And what if you make him like, a badass? You turn that convention on its head. Because you would think that Jody, the brother, who's, Harrison Ford, who's Han Solo, which that's another weird Star Wars connection. He's very Han Solo, the Jody character. The the question becomes like, I think what always makes and what I like in a lot of movies is what I like about Mike Lee movies, where he doesn't always cast pretty people. Reggie Bannister feels like a real person that's put in crazy circumstances, and he gives the movie humanity while you still get you still get car chases and
I
action
feel
scenes.
like the best comparison I have for Reggie and Reggie Bannister is actually Paulie Walnuts, and I forget his name right now. Tony Cereso, I believe is pronounced.
I think that's
The,
correct.
taking elements of the man and adding it into a bigger than life character. I think both were approached very similarly creatively by Coscarelli and the whole creative team on Sopranos. I'm not gonna give Chase all the credit for Paulie.
No, well, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, we'll get to the Sopranos at some point. We could just do a whole fucking Sopranos podcast. Yeah, that's the thing about this franchise that I love what you said, that it is a sense of community and family, and that's really a strength of this movie because it's a very small film. It's very isolated. There's not an
Mhm.
ensemble element. There's not crowd scenes. I think there's probably 10 people in the whole movie if you count everybody.
I was thinking
Y-
there's actually a few body doubles for the nude scenes.
Yeah.
When you see Jodie's bum and when you see the lady in Lavender's boobs, both body doubles, which I never knew.
Well, the opening with the graveyard sex and how the body keeps changing positions from shot to shot is kind of the element because is that continuity mistakes because it's a low budget, or is it the dream logic of the movie? And that's kind of the key to Phantasm. That introduces
Yeah.
you to that world because it could be this was just a mistake, which seems like the obvious answer, but it somehow benefits the movie as opposed to being where other movies you might see that and you would just be laughing at it and going, "Oh, that's a bad movie."
Yeah. And I think that's really the key with this movie. It's very clever filming. It has a lot of ingenuity. Like we talked about Halloween, the original, and I was saying how that movie's immaculate. Every shot in that movie is perfect, like cinematic language, and how it communicates what it needs to in every frame. And I don't think this movie's as elegant as the original Halloween, but I do think, especially it had a much lower budget, I'm assuming, it is very efficient. It's very good filmmaking with next to nothing supporting it financially.
Well, I think that's the most underrated thing about it over the years because I think what's iconic about this movie is the tall man, the Sentinel sphere. I think that's what stayed in the
Hmm.
pop culture lexicon and still has all these years later. Maybe the score was pretty iconic. There's a tubular bell
Yeah.
sort of vibe to it. But Coscarelli is a director. This is a really well-directed movie, and I think that's why I've gone back to it so much over the years. Is that, like you said, the DIY sort of thing and stuff that we made. I'm not saying I could have made this movie, but I can empathize with his approach to making it. I understand how this, like it's you watch a Stanley Kubrick
Yeah.
movie and you're like, well, I don't quite get how you had The Shining in your head. But this
The thing
movie, I
is the
understand. I can follow this movie and empathize from the filmmaking perspective.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying that we could have made the movie either. I'm saying we could have done better, but no. Um, I think the thing with this movie is that it's so intimate, and the low budget adds to that. Grittiness adds that the actors who don't look like Coke commercial models adds to that feeling of reality. And the themes that it touches it gets more poignant every time I watch it. It connects a little bit more. Most importantly, I think the theme that we need to discuss the most, and this is kind of a stick situation, where Mike is working on a car and he gets crushed under it. And then Jody saves him, and it was one of the Jawas that did it. But Mike blames it on quote unquote the retarded kid down the street,
Well,
which
I
never
was
fails to make me laugh.
let's talk about yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the depth of it. Because that's
Yeah.
a point. Because when
Well,
I
for
was
real, the language of the movie though, it's very blue collar. Like that's one tough mother. Those details, even
yeah,
saying retard in a movie, that's linguistic. People say that. It adds to the atmosphere. It
especially in the
adds to the setting.
70s, a guy working on a car in the
Exactly.
70s would have definitely said that. There's no question. When I saw it, but for years though, this franchise to me, I mean, I appreciated the science fiction horror elements combined. But for me, it was mostly just a horror franchise when I was younger. I kind of just was,
Yeah.
I was scared by the movies. I enjoyed the action of them. I always think they kind of have a momentum to. In fact, two and three, I think, like, have really good pacing. This is more of a methodical film. I think two is a very exciting movie.
Yeah.
But I watched this recently with a friend. He brought me a signed 4K copy of it because I still had that like Anchor Bay DVD from back in the day, the one that everybody
Yeah. That's the
had.
one I got.
That's the one everyone has. And he brought me he's like, "Hey, I got you a 4K of this." And I can't remember. I think it was Casarelli or something. It was his signature. And I was like, "Holy shit, man. Thank you." And we watched it. And this is sort of the thing with Blu-ray and 4K. It's sort of like when you see an old movie in the theater, getting to watch higher resolution. I don't think it helps new movies. It makes them look bad, but old movies that were shot on film
It's a new
Uh,
experience.
Totally. It's like, oh, this is what this movie actually was. Especially usually the director's working on these transfers. So it's closer to what they had in their head. And I just got hit with the depth of the thematic elements of this, of just, especially the dream logic. I do think that Jodie dies in this movie. I do think Michael's compets.
Yeah.
This movie itself, I'm not counting I'm only looking at this as a solo film. It's a Nightmare on Elm Street thing. You have to interpret its themes on its own merits and not as the franchise. I do think this is a film about grief of death, and loneliness. I do think the parents being dead. I do think Jodie is dead. I do think that's the intention. I don't think any of the scenes with Jodie are real throughout a lot of it, or they're flashbacks or misinterpretations. I even like to think of the tall man as not an alien that's, at a morgue creating slaves to go to another dimension to work. I think that like Michael makes all of these things up in his head on some level, or he's dreaming these things to
Well, I even
make
think
sense out of the existential dread of death and tragedy.
the mortician representing death too, and this foreign element to a child. It makes sense thematically and imagistically why that would be that way.
Well, the stuff
And
that's happening too is like it's like a kid reading comic books or and stuff like that too. It's got the
yeah,
absurdism.
we're going to a funeral and vilifying the mortician because you see as like the final nail in the coffin of your family. He's solidifying their death.
Yeah, well, even I even think about the scene where the iconic scene at the at the ice cream truck, and the tall man, and he's there and seeing
Mhm.
him. And I was thinking when you're a little kid, you would see something like that, and from a distance, you would think like that's scary, that's a monster, even though he's just a guy standing there. But in his head, it's evil.
I want to bring that scene up real quick because I actually drew a picture of it, and that was my I put it in my binder in high school, so it's in front of my binder. Because there's a scene where young Michael Baldwin, he's looking and he has a lollipop in his mouth as he sees it, and it looks like this, like, and it's such a weird shot of him with this lollipop in his mouth like that. Yeah, as he's in shock about the tall man. So I used to freeze frame or just put like movies on A B repeat. It's I'd talk to friends in high school and we just bullshit over it. And we kept that still image for like hours as we just talk about girls or whatever. And I drew that and that was the my binder insert image.
I love the tall man having like this like orgasm when the truck opens. Reggie opens the truck. He's like,
He loves his ice cream.
and that the
I'm gonna go on the record and say I think Phantasm may have my favorite horror score ever.
I listen to it all the time. I think it kicks ass.
It's for me. It's like Phantasm, Suspiria, Candyman. Personal favorites. I know Exorcist gets top billing. I respect that, but in terms of the ones that I listen to the most, those are my three.
Well, I think Exorcist walked so these could run.
Mhm.
It's like Tubular Bells definitely sets up like it's leading to the synth right wave revolution of horror. It's
Exactly.
toying with it. It just doesn't go there. And then these other films are like, hey, let's do that.
What
I
makes Costa really so brilliant? I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is
No, I'm gonna
important.
grab another beer so you talk while I do that.
All right, I'm gonna talk. You grab another beer. So the thing
Okay,
that makes
bro.
Costa really so brilliant as a director, he's not given enough credit for ever. And if it was just Phantasm, I'd say he got lucky with the theme. But this also shines through in Bubba Hotep. The thing is with it is that he can use the theme, the Phantasm score, the Bubba Hotep theme, and he'll take the same music and apply it to different contexts to convey different emotions. There's times where the Phantasm theme's creepy, times where it's exciting for an action shot. There's times where it's very emotional and sad. And I know that he didn't write the music. I don't know if the same guy did Phantasm and Bubba Hotep. He clearly got very lucky with who he hired for both of those. But it's just very dynamic, and for him knowing to put these themes in and during these scenes, I think really says a lot about him as a director. And Phantasm was supposed to just be in the opening credits and ending I just read today. So he did decide deliberately to insert it into at least the original movie in the way it was. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. I think that was a great choice.
So I fucked up. Um,
Uh-oh.
though the one was neon, right? And that's a 7%, which is fine. That's a great starter beer.
Yes.
But I didn't
That's a
know
good pussy beer.
exactly, but I didn't know I
Should be at
grabbed
least 20.
I didn't know I grabbed the tropical, and it's a
I've
10.
never had that.
It's a
I am currently drinking Victory. Best beer.
Yeah, the 10 is scary. Like 10% is when it's like, oh,
Uh,
this is when beer starts to taste like liquor. It,
yeah, I remember the
uh,
one time we were talking and like I couldn't feel my tongue anymore, and I had that recovery from the LaCroix.
that's right.
I was drinking like the 10-12%.
You drank like 6 of them and you were at that point where you were gonna
Mhm.
pass out, and then somehow you like it's like I shot adrenaline into your chest like Pulp Fiction, and then you were like, we're just back.
It's like Smash Brothers. You're like off the map. You're falling, and you just
Yeah.
happen to
The
jump back on the
recovery,
stage
yeah.
and win.
That's the key to that game. Yeah, is not getting smashed down. It's all about the recovery. Yeah, I think yeah, I because that's the thing. It's we could go into so many individual scenes and things about that, but I do think I just wanted to hit those beats that it is the blue collar thing. It is the cleverness of the direction. It is the community and sense of family. The sense of losing someone. I think that's what makes this film very personal. I think if this film didn't
Yeah,
have the science fiction horror elements, and it was an indie drama about a kid dealing with death, I still think it would be a very emotional film for me and a very
yeah.
powerful film to me. It's just those things like add on to it and then give it textures
The
that
two scenes that hit me the most, the more I watch it, the first is when Jody's on his bike
it's
and
just,
Mike's running behind him.
it's just takes off. Sorry.
That
I was
sucks.
it's like you're like, God, I'm just talking. And I'm like,
I like that scene.
remember that Gizmo shirt? You probably still have it, but you have
Oh
the
yeah,
you have the shirt
I don't anymore.
you have the shirt that
But,
Gizmo
yeah,
used to wear. Where he's like,
I've never gotten more compliments than I got on that
that's the
shirt.
well,
People
that's the
love that
face you
shirt.
make. You make that face. You'll do. I'm
That's
sorry.
funny.
Go ahead. I just
No, the
this
scene
is
where
fucking disgusting though. I'm just gonna say.
Jody's on his bike and Mike's running behind him. He's got a voiceover on it. It's really like Terrence Malick almost. And it's the
Yeah,
whole thing about like Jody moving on and Mike chasing him. And then also the scene where Mike goes out the back of the car and he's on the street. And the editing in that's just immaculate.
that's my
Um,
favorite sequence.
it's just such a poetic movie, and that film's or that scene's the highlight of it.
I think that's the best executed sequence for the low budget in the movie is the car sequence by far. I,
Mhm.
I think there's moments where it's like, wow, that's really cool. Obviously, the white room and everything, but yeah, that's also just the kind of excitement. That's like the peak of the movie. I think
Yeah.
is that moment when the Jawas attack. The girls just get taken. I guess they steal the car, but him going out of the window, laying on the ground, having this like psychic connection to what's going on with Jody, which you could think is him thinking about his brother who's dead. And
That's what
then
I was gonna
when
say.
the eyes open and the music's kicking in and the shot there, and it's probably a handheld shot. I doubt they had something to do that movement. It might be a steady cam rig that they did.
I think it was a Steadicam for the shot of Jody's grave at the end. I think that was the only Steadicam shot in the movie, to
So
my
so
understanding.
just that shot with the eyes opening, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a powerful image. And it's like you said, it's like poetry art because I don't 100% know what it all means, but I feel so much from it. It speaks on its own. It doesn't need to be part of the movie or the greater universe of fan. Because what's cool is that it's kind of the genius of this movie and what he does is that you get this very like cheap horror scene where a car is getting attacked and it's clearly like children or little people in costumes attacking them and you can't really tell what's going on. And then within like 30 seconds he turns it into an artistic experience
Yeah.
within the same sequence.
Seamlessly.
He shifts it. Yes, he shifts the tone like that. And that's kind of what makes this movie so interesting compared to a lot of other horror movies. And this franchise, but this movie in
Yeah.
particular in the franchise has that. Um
Well, one thing that always stuck with me and my one issue with the movie that as I get older actually becomes a positive thing was you see Reggie die. And then it turns out that Jody's the one dead. And that to me felt like a cop out the first few times I watched it. I
yeah.
was happy Reggie's alive. I'd rather him be in the series consistently than Jody. But I never understood why they did that. It never quite clicked until years later from first seeing it. Where to me, and you'd said this word earlier, it feels to me like Mike is compensating or bargaining with death, the tall man, by saying, "You can have Reggie, my caretaker, but please give me Jody back."
I agree. I think well, that's what hit me when that recent watch. This was probably I guess this was last year when I watched this, rewatched it. It might have been 2020, but I'm pretty sure it was early last year. It was like 2 in the morning. I've always watched this movie late at night. I don't know if I've ever watched Phantasm
Yeah.
during the daytime.
I almost watched it. I watched it preparing for this, even though I've seen it a
Yeah.
million times.
Yeah.
It's just a great movie to rewatch. I could watch it any day of the week. The whole series, honestly. Even the lesser ones, I can watch any day of the week. But it feels sacrilegious watching it like 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's not a Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon movie. It's like it's midnight. I think it helped the movie too. Like it was on cable a lot or TNT. If
Yeah.
you were a kid, that's what first got me into horror movies was just the cable revolution. So it would be late at night, your parents would be sleeping, and I would watch like a Friday the 13th movie or Phantasm would always be on or Phantasm 2 or something.
This movie's such a mood piece. You almost have to romance it. You need it to be dark. You want the fireplace on or a candle. There needs to be an atmosphere there. You don't just like raw dog it in Burger King.
It's what the kids today call a vibe. There's a
Yes.
vibe to Phantasm, and if you're not in that vibe, I think it can feel like a kind of a clinical boring experience. Because 'cause I've had moments with this movie where
Yeah.
it's like, "I'm just not in the mood for this right now." But if you're
I've
in
shown
that
it to people and they've had that
well,
experience
Blue
with it, which is
Velvet's not
sad.
far Blue Velvet works as a thriller, but if you're not in the right headspace, you don't really get to experience Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
This movie's the same way, where it could seem like a really boring, kind of cheap, dated 70s horror movie, or it's like you're there, you're in it, you're part of it. And I just love all of those things about it. Him running those two scenes are my favorite too. Him running in the car and him falling because they're probably the best scenes of the movie. Uh, I will say it's. I guess we could talk about certain things. So, from a storytelling standpoint, the story of this film. That's why it's a hard film to talk about. It's very
Yeah.
sloppy. It isn't like a well-constructed narrative about I mean, you can follow
Yeah.
it, what's happening with the tall man and that when he convinces Jody and Reggie I mean, that's part I like about it. It's like they have to team up together and then they go to take it on. That part's really
Yeah.
fun about it. And that's a lot of the movie. And you get these wonderful little moments of whimsy, like when Reggie just shows up with the guitar and they start jamming on the porch.
It seems hot as love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's moments like that where it's kind of Richard Linklater-ish. You know, it's just
Yeah.
like something happening and you're like, "Oh man, I'm in this." And the next thing you know, you're like it's night and they're filming in a graveyard and it's like like a Halloween store
You know what
sequence.
ties it together? Like that scene where like the ice cream man that's at the funeral early in the film shows up and he just starts jamming out with the older brother. What holds it together, makes it all work. The connective tissue of this movie, I really think, is just a love between the cast. And I know I said family earlier, but it's just a love. You feel warmth watching this movie,
Yeah.
and you feel a passion for film.
Yeah, it's the power of
And
movies. The power of movies are
yeah,
it's the power of independent film. This is how I feel about Half Nelson, and other movies where it's where I think it could be the most penetrating cinema. It's why I've never strive too much for more than kind of a lower budget sort of aesthetic. Like, whenever I meet anybody and they want to make like $100 million movie or Star Wars movie, I have no interest in any of that kind of stuff. I never have. It's not in my sensibilities.
yeah.
It's not what I think there's a place for it. And like obviously there's Steven Spielberg's and they could do that stuff. But I've often found the most powerful stuff and is even more than Bergman, who can make these really sophisticated, entertaining movies out of themes, is just when you capture something on the camera that's real. It's real emotions that
Yeah.
translate. And yeah, there is a sense of love in this. This movie's very much a young man, which is Casarelli, a young man dealing with personal themes with people that I think understand those themes contextually by knowing him. And
What's so
so
weird is,
we
oh,
don't know
sorry,
all of it. Well, we don't know all of it as an audience, but they do, and we're
you
feeling
feel
that.
it.
Yeah.
Well, even the tall man and like the love for Angus Scrim that they all have shines. I think even more in the sequels. And that's the thing. Like even like I think 3 is a lesser movie in the series. Ravager's a lesser series,
The
but
opening
I'm
to
still
3 though.
thankful. Oh, the opening to 3 is 10 out of 10.
No,
It's incredible.
it's like
It is
holy
so
shit.
hype.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. But yeah, it's like holy crap.
But even those movies that like, and for me, 3 when I first saw it, I loved 1 and 2. When I was like, oh my gosh, this is I can't even describe
I
it.
still think 2 is one of the best like horror action movies ever made.
It's easily one of the best sequels ever made.
Yeah, of the 80s, like
Like Psycho
80s,
2,
like of
Phantasm
80s like
2.
genre movies, like it's not quite at
Yeah,
like that Fright Night or some other movies levels, but it's like a better movie than Lost Boys, which is more
yeah.
famous.
I
You
like
know.
it more than Aliens personally.
Well,
I
no,
know
it's
that's a wild opinion, but
but
I like it
well,
more.
I think it plays in that thing where it's like a perfect action sequel to a more methodical
Yeah.
original film, and it expands on the mythology like Aliens do.
So I was really disappointed in Phantasm 3 when I first saw it. And every time I see it, it just gets like 1% better. And I've seen it so many times over the years that I like the movie quite a bit now. I think it's a fun time. But even when I didn't care for it as much, or Ravager's obviously not the best of the sequels.
Ravager,
Just
brother. We made a
um,
show years ago. Uh, I won't reveal it yet. We won't talk about it because it's like the
yeah.
outskirts of the internet. But we did a show years ago that was about two guys that were like horror fans that we did together. It was like the first project. It was like one of the first projects we worked on together. Because the first thing we did
Mhm.
was Last Call, because I had only known you a few weeks, and we were just making a movie.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous.
We didn't even know each other.
It was like, hey, you want to make a movie? Yeah.
Yeah. You were like 19 and
What if we make the
18.
crazier? I'm trying to think. So it was spring semester of college, and my birthday's in February.
I think you were
So
19.
I might have been just 19.
You were
I
just
think I
not.
was just
You were a
19.
baby though. You were like high school was
Yeah.
still like your reference point for life. Like I would talk to you
Mhm.
about things, and your reference point was high because that's how it is when you're young. But
Yeah.
it was funny. We were hanging out. We would sit at a table and just
And
talk.
just impersonate Crispin Glover for like 6
Yeah,
hours.
that's true. I really wish that was an exaggeration. These like 10-hour conversations about one person. And then I was just like, "Hey, you want to make a movie? Like, I like talking to you. We could do that." And you're like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And then
We can talk, we can make a movie.
we wrote a movie in like 2 weeks, and then we shot it. But one of our first projects, there was the season 2 opening, and the whole thing was built. The whole thing was built around talking with hands. The whole thing was built around the Ravager trailer, and we were two homeless guys, and we had to get access to the internet to watch the Ravager trailer, and we built that whole thing around it. And just how bad that trailer was, and then how bad Ravager ended up being too. Like it's
I think I told you about this as we were working on it, but the inspiration for that was I had a friend back in high school and then later on in life, and I don't know what's going on with this guy. He shows up every now and then. I don't think he's dead yet. Really cool dude, but just has problems. He was
You're a cool dude, but you got a lot of problems.
yeah. He was homeless and he was messaging us when the Ravager trailer came out. Like, dude, Ravager. And my one friend to me said, is a mutual friend that both of us know. He's like, "You're fucking homeless. I don't want to talk to you about the new Phantasm movie trailer." And it was so funny. Oh, I
Oh
just
wait,
unplugged everything.
yeah, your video went out.
I don't know what the fuck just happened.
Yeah, you're
Hold
in the
up.
okay, you're back. I could see you.
Okay, that's weird. I just unplugged one thing.
It's not that big of a deal. Your light just went out for a
Nah.
second.
Yeah, I got it.
See,
I just got my leg tangled up.
you talk about Ravager, and this is what happens.
Yeah.
Remember there's the
It's a
giant
haunted movie.
sentinel sphere. It's like a
Oh, it's like a
Godzilla ship.
9/11 situation.
There's a second sentinel sphere that
The
shows up
thing with
later.
Ravager, I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah.
What's so tough about the movie is it has major faults, but it still has, and not nearly as much. I think that costs really going to the Lucas comparison. Him not directing Ravager shows a lot. But I still think that family aspect shows. There's moments in that movie that I'm just so grateful for. And like there's bad moments between like Angus and Reggie. There's bad moments all around, but there's certain moments that shine through, like the scene where Reggie's with that woman in the cabin and it's got a blanket from the original Phantasm movies playing the guitar trying to write a song for her. And I'm like, fuck, this is the vibes I want. And I'm
What
just so thankful to get one more chance to see that.
What's where I think the movie messed up, I think a lot of these crowd-funded movies at the time, these Kickstarter movies, the Angry Video Gamer movie, they all tried to go big and have these special
Yeah,
effects, and it's like, why not just make the Reggie Bannister movie, take the money, do those kind of scenes? You don't need these big set pieces because you can't afford to make them
exactly.
look good. What was cheap and worked in 1979 doesn't work in a 2000s movie. It's just a different
Mhm.
era. The Sentinel Sphere effects and everything that happens in this movie for the 70s, you watch it and you're like, "Wow, that's really cool. You guys had, like, strings and you did that." But then when you
I
have
was
it
gonna say
be
it's all practical.
when you have CGI and we're comparing it to big budget CGI, it just looks like shit,
Yeah.
where this is impressive because of the ingenuity, like you said earlier. So let's talk about a few sequences, iconic ones. The Sentinel Sphere sequence, the, "Oh, shit."
Yeah.
And he runs away from the tall man. Eh, the Sentinel Sphere in general is definitely one of, like, the top for me, and it was in my household. It's so weird, my father was upset, like, it's weird to think your taste of your father. It's this weird
A
dynamic, you know what
Taste
I'm
of Your Father sounds like some
Yeah.
fetish
The
movie.
taste of your father's yeah, it's like a funeral parade of roses. It's, some Criterion release, Taste of Father.
From the director of Blue is the Warmest Color.
Yeah, the taste of my father's cock. Well, no, your dad. I think a lot. My dad liked Jaws and Caddyshack. He liked
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. You become kind of a dad rocker when you're young because your dad likes these bands from the time when he was young. This was a lot. It was the narcissism of boomers. It was that was a lot of
Mhm.
it. That my time was the great time, and they tried to project that onto their children a lot. But my dad, for some reason, I saw Phantasm. My dad didn't even like horror films, and he had this huge he loved Reggie Bannister, he loved the world of
Yeah.
Phantasm, he was really
I had
obsessed with it.
my former stepdad had the same thing. It was weird. He wasn't totally into horror films or anything like that. He's a rocker guy, but he loved Ted Nugent. He had a dog named Nuge,
Yeah. Oh,
and he would
Ted
play.
Nugent would fit perfectly in this
Yeah.
movie. It
Well, this
wouldn't fit
guy,
a
he
lot of
would play
things.
guitar. Did I ever tell you this? He'd play guitar, and he trained his dogs how to howl with the song. Like they're singing along with it to this Ted Nugent song. I
S
can't make that up. I'm not
say
smart enough to make something up that weird.
saying the N-word. Good job,
So
boy.
he didn't get me to watch the movie, but he mentioned it to me. He's like, you know, he's into horror. He's like, you need to watch this movie Phantasm. It's really great. It's about like this mausoleum, and there's an alien in it, and he's like making people midgets. And he didn't sell me on it. His like description was like awful.
I don't know, that sounds pretty good to me. There's a mausoleum and he's turning people into midgets. I'm like, what is this?
Well, speaking of that, I have a pitch because I know Danny McBride said he wants to remake this or whatever. You know, he's not doing shit. What about I just forgot which one. Jordan Peele's Phantasm.
Oh,
Think about it.
Blacktasm?
Yes.
Yeah.
The tall man says boy, which has racial connotations. Have it be a little black boy. And he's taking people, he's enslaving them, making them less of men. It could be an allegory. This could be about America.
Tyler Perry's the tall man.
He
Actually, I
plays
mean,
the tall
I know
man.
you're saying that jokingly, but like I'm totally down for Black Phantasm.
I'm down for like any kind of revisioning, honestly, at this point, because like we're not going to get another sequel, so who cares?
Well,
I want the Danny McBride version. I think he could pull it off with his crew.
I just watched that movie Barbarian, and it did make me think of People Under the Stairs because it's got a similar thing, and I do think about that movie a lot. That Wes Craven made that, and I think about these Jordan Peele movies, which I'll just say I'm not a big fan of. Uh,
People ask me all the time, "Have you seen that new Jordan Peele movie?" And I'm always like, "Nope."
It's such a I'm so glad he made that so we could say nope. It's like he knew. It's like
I feel like it was
oh,
self-aware.
totally. No, it's his most clever moment. All of his titles, like Get
It sucks 'cause
Out.
I like Jordan Peele, like, as a
Yes.
dude. I
Yes.
just don't like him as a horror filmmaker.
Key and Peele.
Hysterical.
Yeah,
Good
great
stuff.
show. Well direct because I think he's a good director. I think those
Mhm.
sketches are well direct. I think it might actually their show has some of the best directed sketches. Like it's like Kids in the Hall,
Yeah.
where it's
Well,
like
I even think, like, Get Out, like, it wasn't an awful movie, it was just a mixed
no.
bag. It was just
No.
tone deaf.
Yeah, now you're like if you fall like politically, you're supposed to either hate or like it. And it's like there's a lot of good things about Get Out. Like I like a
I
lot of
love the
scenes.
handheld cinematography in a lot of it. That was my
Well,
favorite part.
well, there's even lines like the dad when he's like, if Obama could have ran for a third term, I would have voted for him.
Yeah.
There's funny
The
satire.
cast was
No,
it was a really well cast movie.
yeah, Daniel Kaluuya is very good in it.
Yeah.
There's and even the sunken place, these things, it was very M. Night Shyamalan. It had
Mhm.
sort of this, like when he came out on the scene. Because what I thought with Get Out at the time was, okay, you did these sketches. You basically did a long form sketch into a movie. So it's going to have issues. But I did think,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to evolve this. And now it just feels like he's a hack to me,
I always say with
you
Jordan
know.
Peele, because I agree, I think that way too. But to give him the benefit of doubt, he has such a level of hype to his name now. Who could ever live up to that? It's almost unfair to expect him to live up to
Well,
the
the first
expectations
movie,
set.
first movie's a huge hit, and he wins an Oscar for screenplay.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think that M Night Shyamalan, Sixth Sense is just too good of a movie to be your breakout,
Yeah.
where everybody thought he was going to be Spielberg. And then Unbreakable at the time, people were mixed, and now at time we all like
Will end up being
Unbreakable.
Stephen King, but like post car accident Stephen King.
That's exactly right. I think that's a dead on comparison. Yeah, he's and I think he actually kicked off a lot of that kind of like the problem with 2000s horror movies or genre stuff. I think a lot of it owes service to M. Night Shyamalan, what he
Hmm.
became. But you go back, The Sixth Sense isn't great because it's a scary ghost story. It's the scenes like the scene in the car with him and the mother, and him
The
telling
scariest
this.
scene in the movie is the opening with
Yeah.
what the hell is his name? The Beastie Boy.
Oh, it's Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah, New Kids on the Block. Yeah, it's a
That's
like
it. Yeah, New Kids.
when it's just a thriller.
Yeah.
If it was Mikey D or whatever from Beastie Boys or one of those guys.
It's all three of them.
Yeah, it's the three Beastie Boys. But no, it's one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Is that opening when he's in
Yeah.
the underwear. But it's a very human drama. It's a psychological drama that just takes like the and there's a lot of X-Files to it. I actually love when the movie takes the
Yeah.
shift when him and Bruce Willis team up to go solve the mystery of the dead girl and then her mother killed her.
Well,
I
that's the
think
thing. Yeah,
that's
like
a
the mother poisoning the child scarier than ghosts.
phenomenal. Well, it's like the ghosts aren't as bad as the real life things of people. That's sort of
Yeah.
the thing. The Sixth Sense gives the kid, it's kind of his shining. He gets an awareness to these otherworldly things, but then all you learn from that is the cruelty and suffering of people. And the Bruce Willis character kind of has to come to terms with that as well. That this thing that he messed up, he couldn't fix this kid, ends up being the thing that killed him, and he lost everything because of it. Um, but M. Night Shyamalan, which Cosarelli's influence, I would say, is this movie making the 20 million when it did, does open the door for an Evil Dead to come onto the scene and get produced
Yeah.
at the time a few years later. I mean, this is 79, that's 81. So it
Well,
took
I
a couple of
mean,
years.
going back to Stephen King was influenced by Phantasm to the point where he even put the Sentinel spheres in one of the Dark Tower books. Like,
Well, this is very Stephen King, and this is when he was
yes,
like writing Carrie and stuff, but this feels like a Stephen King book. The character, that thing you said about family community, that's all very Stephen King. These small towns.
yeah.
This is like, if he wrote this, this would be, 600 pages and we would know the backstory of everybody. And it sounds like the
There'd be an
3 hour,
orgy scene with Mike and six other
yeah.
kids.
Well, the 3 hour version of this, maybe it was more like that, where you fleshed out
Hmm.
every backstory. But I do think that's the key comparison. I mean, we could talk about George Lucas from a filmmaking standpoint of that, but I do think it, more than anything, this feels like a Stephen King story. It has Stephen King elements where he takes the supernatural, puts it in community, and uses that to explore some existential dread. Often in his work is death.
Even more so, it's a coming of age horror story.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So I do think there is some kind of Carrie energy here. I do think there's some Pet Cemetery energy here, especially the book. But what he does in this movie, as opposed to what Stephen King does, Stephen King a lot of the time will sort of take it to that end point, leading to the cosmic core, but then he'll sort of take it to this end point, and Cosarelli, he does use some gimmicks, like you said, Reggie getting stabbed, or even the ending, which becomes a staple of the franchise of a shock ending. He does the Nightmare on Elm Street ending
Yeah.
before. Uh, he doesn't
He
give
does
you.
it better than Nightmare on Elm Street too.
Oh, it's way better. This is
Yeah,
the
no, the ending of Phantasm is incredible.
it's a kick ass. Yeah. But he doesn't give you all the answers to everything. It's not an easy. They're very
No.
cerebral This film is very cerebral and psychologically complex in that way. He doesn't give you the. It's like, okay, there's a Dune reference. Okay, there's these moments like him falling out of the car. There's these moments of things like this, but you don't totally 100% even after all the viewings know what all of this means or what his intention was.
Yeah, what I love about it is that I feel like he's pulling from the subconscious. I don't think he's even operating on a conscious level. And he, allegedly, he went to a cabin like for a few weeks to write this movie, and just let all that sink in. Where like the fingers, he poked his fingers through a styrofoam cup and wiggled it like, oh, what if this was a severed finger? And I think it just works on some subconscious level, almost like music, just like Reggie being a musician. I think it all connects on that. Like even the musical element of the tuning fork,
That's what I was
which
gonna say.
parallels
Yeah.
the dimensional whatever the dimensional poles or whatever in Reggie, because of his tuning fork understanding that. I think that the this movie works in the same way that like a concept album like Dark Side of the Moon or Tommy functions, where it's not point A to point B to point Z. It's more of an emotional carryover.
I think it's dead on. I was going to bring up the music because you brought that up. Yeah, because that's the David Lynch thing, the electricity, the
Yeah,
interconnecting things over the movies. It's almost like this movie is approached more from a musical notes standpoint than a conventional storytelling standpoint. You hear sounds, so you evoke certain feelings from the sounds. So he uses those same kind of elements in a movie making sense. I agree. I don't think he approaches this from a filmmaking standpoint. I think he approaches this more from like a guy making an album with his friends almost, from a
yeah.
audible
In the collaborative element.
yeah, that's a band. The band's where yeah, everybody in this movie is part of the band. And he's the, the front man and songwriter or what have you. But like Reggie's clearly the guitar player, and yeah, that's great. I want to talk about it real quick because this movie has, it has its big ending, the house and the set piece and stuff. But I want to talk about the chase
Mhm.
sequence because it's got one of the chase sequences. Where do you rank this in chase sequences? Like, a Texas Chainsaw, Michael chasing after
Glory.
Jamie Lee, yeah, Laurie, Jamie Lee Curtis is Laurie, or like Fred, which I'm not gonna rank that one high. I don't think Freddy's final chase with Nancy is actually that great. That's when the movie starts to fall apart.
No, it's the low point of the movie.
But the tall man showing up at the house,
That's yeah, and then the theme kicks in, which might be my favorite use of the theme in the series, honestly.
you play a good game, boy, and
Yeah, it's
chasing him. I mean, where do you put it in the chase sequences in like horror movies?
I have to say it might be number one for me. It's the one I get the most excited for.
It
When he
is,
opens the door,
yeah,
it's just
it's
in
so
the
high.
theme, the whole thing. I get like Texas Chainsaw when they're running through the woods at night. It looks to me like Sleeping Beauty or something.
Well, also the chainsaw element, because
Yeah, that helps.
every haunted house movie's copied that. Because if you go to,
Yeah,
if I mean, every haunted house, if you go to a haunted house, one of the things that every cliche has, because it's always
a
scary,
chainsaw.
is a guy
Yeah,
pops up behind you, starts a chainsaw, and it's scary as fuck. So I think that
Yeah,
the reason that one stands out is because a lot of the other ones, like the tall man's just chasing him and reaching his arms out like a ghoul, or Michael Myers is
yeah,
walking with a knife, but Leatherface is chasing you and swinging around a fucking chainsaw. It's just more
yeah.
brutal. It's animalistic. I don't see the
I think
tall man
just
as an animal. I see the tall man more as like this force of
yeah, he's
nature.
an ethereal alien force that you don't quite comprehend.
Yeah.
For me, it's probably my favorite, honestly. The chainsaw thing, I totally get. I agree. But in terms of personal taste, just nothing hypes me up more than that shot of the tall man entering and the theme kicking in.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of comparisons, even to be. I remember comparing to everybody, but I do think there's a lot of things he achieves here is like Toby Hooper with Texas Chainsaw, where it is
Yeah,
like
the
a
grittiness.
and the cleverness in the low budget filmmaking. I think that film obviously became way more iconic and
Yeah.
redone, but also it's just more of just a simple premise. Like you could say, kids break down in a van and they fall into these cannibalistic rednecks who try to kill them and eat them. Where
Which is the
Phantasm,
chainsaw element.
it's
It's like a
hard.
clown.
It's hard to give a synopsis of Phantasm.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's hard
Like
to
I said with my
explain what.
stepdad trying to sell the movie to me, like I can talk for hours about the plot of this movie, but it doesn't matter. It's a vibe.
It's also just one of the best titles.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like a Pink Floyd album title or like a King Crimson or something.
I think
Phantasm.
Fantasia.
Yeah. Well, then the abstract, phantasmagorical.
Even the commercials, it has amazing commercials for the original movie. I think all the movies have pretty good commercials, honestly. But the first especially, where it just defines Phantasm in this red text on black background, and you see like, thunk, when the Sentinel sphere sinks into the caretaker's head. It's just so good. I miss when movies had creative commercials like that.
Where do you rank the Sentinel Sphere as like a movie? I don't. I guess.
Boogeymen. Boogeymen is the name of the VHS tape I had that had the compilation of scenes that included this. It just hit me. I had to bring that up. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But where do you rank the Sentinel Sphere as far as like? I guess I wouldn't call it a. I guess it's a weapon. I don't know. Are they?
Yeah,
Are
it's.
they? Are they sentient? Are they part of this alien race?
I
And
think they are.
they're
I think so because
sentient, right?
Jody becomes one
Right.
in
That's
Phantasm
correct.
3.
Yeah, because that's the thing I want to talk about. We got some shit on our slaughtered lamb deep dive because we were mostly being jokey, but I want to get into serious conversation.
Shout out real quick. Shout out to the guy that said it was the worst movie analysis he'd ever seen.
Yeah. Well, there was
I'm
one
not
guy.
joking because I've talked shit on the internet about film critics, so like to get that myself's cool. Like
Yeah, I know.
it made me laugh.
Well, I love it's because we said that they were acting stupid. I said that, which they were. Which I wasn't saying as a criticism. They were just the characters act stupid. I don't think David and Jack made a smart decision what they did, and that
No, they're goofy.
we didn't understand why the slaughtered lamb people. They were just like, just because it's stupid and you don't understand it doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. Worst film analysis I've ever heard. Seen analysis. Well, I
You know,
think
I almost liked that comment. Just I don't
well, I
know.
didn't
I felt
delete it
like
or
it.
anything. I'm not one of those people
Yeah.
like fuck you. Well, I think I messed up when I made the thumbnail thing because I basically took a clip out of a podcast where we were being very joking, and I put it in the
Yeah.
context of like it's a scene analysis because I could do a serious scene analysis, but subtext is just life. I could add meaning that isn't there. We were very much approaching it, I think, much more realistically, which is
Which
like John Landis probably didn't know how to edit or do this in a way and just kind of did what he could do in
I think
1980.
we
I
were
think
just
that makes
playing
sense.
around with the concept of the scene. Like we both love that scene.
I think it's like one of the greatest scenes ever. That's what people don't. When
Yeah.
someone says that, it's
The
like
reverence for it.
I don't think the scene is stupid I love this scene. I think it's like one of the greatest scenes in a movie ever.
The
I'm a huge
characters
fan.
in this scene were not acting intelligently, which is how it's written to be.
Yeah, and it's okay for the characters not to make smart decisions. It's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay for these two college guys to be goofy and to not be aware. Also, it was a more innocent time, which was something that was brought up in the podcast. Was just nowadays we're just much more savvy to things. We're less risk. We're more risk averse nowadays than we were back in the
Yeah.
day. So, we're more scared of like, well, hey, serial killers used to be a thing. I don't want to get killed, so that just doesn't happen as much as it used to. You don't take
Yeah.
risks anymore. Like, yeah, would I like to backpack on the moors together with you? Yes. Would we do it? No, I wouldn't do it ever. I'd be like, that's
We're
insane.
poor.
Yeah, we're gonna yeah. I just feel like we're gonna fucking die. I mean, what even if we were gonna get attacked by a werewolf, we'd probably just die from walking and freeze.
Starvation.
Yeah, where are we going? We're walking on a road at one
Just
o'clock in the
slaughter
morning.
lamb.
Yeah.
Real
Uh,
quick. I gotta take a piss break.
it's okay. Go ahead. Obviously, this part's gonna get cut out, so it doesn't matter. Although nothing matters really in relative terms, so I guess in the end, we can just pretend. It'd be funny if I just let the silence stay in of you being gone pissing for like 2 minutes. I'm just sitting here.
I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some things here on the Wikipedia article, just some information here, because I think we should wrap it up soon. Because I really don't have
Yeah.
much. I don't have much to say.
Yeah, it's a tough movie to discuss.
Well, we talked about the themes, we talked about the scenes we liked. I really wanted to talk about the car sequence. I mean, if it wasn't for copyright and fair use being, something that they don't, we'd watch the sequence and kind of break it down. But unfortunately, you can't do stuff like that.
Yeah,
Uh, but I'd like to. I don't know. It's more of a movie you experience than you talk about.
I agree.
I've never had a great Phantasm conversation. It probably was a bad pick for a podcast episode, to be honest. But I think the hangout
Yeah,
vibe of the podcast captures kind of what you get from watching Phantasm. Is my
yeah,
approach. After seeing the audience reaction to jump scares in Kenny and Company, writer-director Don Coscarelli decided to do a horror film as his next project. Previous films did not perform well, but he had heard that horror films were always successful. That's still true today. If you want to get a movie made, make a horror film. Branching into horror allowed him to combine his childhood love into horror of the genre with better business prospects. The original idea was inspired by Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Coscarelli had initially sought to adapt that story into a film, but the license had already been sold. The theme of a young boy's difficulty convincing adults of his fears was influenced by Invaders from Mars and Dario Argento's Suspiria, and its lack of explanations was another influence on Coscarelli. The soundtrack was influenced by Goblin and Mike Oldfield, who did Tubular Bells. The synthesizers were so primitive that it was difficult to reproduce the same sound twice. When writing the film's conclusion, Coscarelli intentionally wanted to shock the audience and send people out of the theater with the bang. I didn't think about Something Wicked This Way Comes. They did make a Disney film of that
yeah.
later, but there is that element here with the boys.
I didn't think of that until I actually just read it today myself. I was just going over some stuff before we recorded and noticed that. I think Reggie Bannister was the one that suggested it too.
Well, I think thinking about Stephen King, we don't always think the godfather of that whole thing in a lot of ways is Bradbury.
Yeah.
And I still don't think cinematically he's ever really been captured properly. It seems like it's kind of
Mhm.
impossible to adapt him.
That's the great thing. That's the thing about great writers is that you can't replicate their voice. I'm not comparing myself in any way to any good, let alone great writer, but in terms of like plagiarism, I've never worried about it because it's like, okay, go ahead and try to do what I do. And I feel like great writers like Ray Bradbury, like you can't just emulate that.
Well, what I always liked about your books, even your early one, I think it was called A Clockwork to the Stars. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
You wrote
yeah.
when
I
you were
was,
like,
I think I was 13 when I wrote
yeah,
that
you were
one.
13 or 14. You were like 13. Um, your books, and I don't think you intend to do this, and you've tried to counter this with other works like Aaron Texter's book club, but it just can't help but be esoteric and kind of a literary experience. It doesn't become a commercial reading
Yeah,
experience ever, and I don't know. I don't think you intend to do that. I think it just happens. Um,
I think like being like a teenager, you're just writing to write, of course. And
yeah.
then as I've gotten older, I've leaned into that a lot more with recent projects where it's like I found freedom and independence. Where it's like, oh, I don't have to write in a commercial way, so like it doesn't have to be a certain length. It doesn't have to follow a formula. you can do what's best for the project and not consider the commercial elements anymore.
Well, I've seen you write stuff that's writing. Like I've read articles you've written. You wrote this wonderful
Hmm.
article after Gene Wilder died called "We Are the Music Makers."
Oh, that's fine. That was during the period we weren't talking, so it's cool you read that.
Yeah, no, I thought it was well
Oh,
because I had
someone
made.
shared that a few times.
Yeah, I guess that'll be the history of the podcast as it goes on that we didn't talk for 6 years. Not, yeah, I guess
Yeah,
it was. It was about 6 years.
I was in a coma
Yeah, I was by your bedside for that
while
time.
writing. In a coma writing about Gene
Honestly, I
Wilder.
think it was probably I mean, I don't want to say it was better, but it was probably in the end of life experience, it was probably a positive thing that we took time off because you get tired of someone else. You
Yeah,
spent so much time with them. So having years off, it's like, okay, well, we have 6 years to get bored of each other now.
exactly. And
You know what I mean? It's
that's
like,
what this podcast is going to be. It's going to be the gradual realization that two people are bored of each other.
well, because you want to think. Sometimes I think in my head, it's like, if you could get back with that ex girlfriend after years of no contact, it might work out better for you for a few years than it would a new relationship, just because. And it depends on the breakup,
Yeah.
obviously, a more terrible breakup, but I'm talking about a more casual one. Or maybe you kind of
Well,
split
it's more the
apart.
like will they, won't they's that never quite actualizes. I think those are the
Yeah.
more haunting ones.
Yes. Yes. But the idea of like, can I get back with this person I had this connection with, but you're kind of making up for lost time, so you always have something to talk about.
Yeah.
You're past that point of boredom because it's like, well, we just don't talk enough to be bored of each other. There was no accountants on the set, but Cosarelli estimates the budget to be at 300,000. Funding for the film came in part from Cosarelli's father, who is credited as a producer. Additional funding came from doctors and lawyers. His mother designed some of the special effects, costumes, and makeup. The cast and crew were compounded mainly of friends and aspiring professionals. Due to their inexperience, they did not realize that firing blanks could be dangerous. Cosarelli's jacket caught fire from a shotgun blank. Casting was based on previous films that Cosarelli directed, and he created roles for the actors. Because he could not afford to hire an editor or cameraman, Cosarelli did these duties himself. Filming was done on weekends and would last 20 hours a day over the course of more than a year. Reggie Bannister described the production as flying by the seat of our pants. The actors would be called to perform their scenes and picked up as soon as they were available. Bannister did many of his own stunts. Though set in Oregon, shooting took place primarily in the San Fernando Valley in the Chatsworth, California. Scripts change had happened often during production, and Bannister says that he never saw a completed copy of it. Instead, they worked scene by scene and used improvisation. The script was characterized by Cosarelli as barely linear. While it contained the basic concepts of a completed film, the script was unfocused and rewritten during the filming. The spheres came from one of Cosarelli's nightmares, but the original idea did not involve drilling. Will Green, an elderly metal worker, fashioned the iconic spheres, but he never got to see the finished film as he died before it was released. The black 1971 Plymouth Barracuda was used because Cosarelli had known someone in high school who drove one. He realized that he could get his hands on one by using it in the film. So that's a lot of what we talked about, right? So it's almost like that guy from American Movie making
Yeah.
Coven,
Rip.
e- except this was successful, but he's like, okay, these people I know in my town, my mom's gonna do the special effects.
Real quick, I found out today the mother wrote a novelization of this movie. There's only 500 copies made. I'd never known that being a fan. It was like more recent. It was released too.
Well, how much do you think about this as Cosarelli Michael, and it's about him dealing with the fact if his parents did die, because obviously very close to his parents. Do you think that there's any kind of I mean,
I
because it's
think
hard
on
to
a subconscious level, it's hard to say
right.
because like the concept of death in general could apply to anyone. Like I was saying, to a friend recently, we were talking about people we knew our age that died. I was talking about a mutual friend that we went to college with, saying how I had a reunion, a high school reunion this year. I wasn't able to go due to a family emergency, but I thought, oh, maybe I'll run into her there. And it's like, oh, she's dead. And it's sometimes you have those moments like my grandmother's been dead 15 years. And I'll think when I go to see my grandfather, oh, see my grandparents. And even though I've known she's dead this long, I have to realize that she's gone. And so the whole concept of death to me is very kind of strange and universal. It's a weird thing.
Well, that's the thing about this movie, is that it's a lot of horror movies use the theme of impending death. The shark in Jaws is death. A lot of but
Yeah.
this movie I think deals with it in a very realistic way, or like what it's like in life. I think even the title Phantasm and the dream logic. Dreams don't make sense, but they happen. You experience them even though you don't always quite understand what they mean. Losing someone in your life and yet still kind of having the memories of them after the fact, like they still exist, but then you have to
Yeah.
come to the realization they don't, is a phantasm experience. It is a dream experience. You experience
Yeah.
the feelings, you wake up from them and realize they're not real. And I don't think that's that
Well,
different from memory.
I was telling you I watched this documentary on Tom Savini before we recorded tonight. And he talks about being close with his father, living with his father, even when he was making his famous movies. And his father got pneumonia, and they went to visit him. And it's a really emotional movie. I was shocked how emotional the movie was in many ways. As a horror fan, where it's like your love of the genre, his personal life. But anyhow, he talks about his father had pneumonia and it caused him to have a heart attack, I believe. But it caused his father to pass away. I think unexpectedly. And what he did was he had his wife leave and he stayed with his father's dead body after for like 3 hours, and he watched it go from like his father to a yellowish tint to kind of a grayish tint until he said eventually I knew that this wasn't my father anymore, and I watched it in real time, like my father leave bit by bit.
It's fucked up.
Yeah, no, it's really deep.
It's the Dear Zachary of horror makeup.
Out of
Well,
all one of them, that is
well,
definitely the Dear Zachary
I
of
heard
them.
someone say recently, and it made sense to me. Like documentaries should almost be illegal because they could film all this footage and then edit it down to the best parts and manipulate you
Well, for sure.
more than most mediums can. At least film
Well, I've
mediums.
said that before, where like people watch a documentary on something, like a political issue or whatever, and they're like, "Well, I saw this documentary on it, and I trust the documentary." Like, why would you ever trust a documentary? That is like the worst source of
It's all
information.
Michael Moore. It's all propaganda. It's basically just as fictional as a lot of movies, but it's under the skies of like being reality.
And documentaries are like my favorite movies.
Oh, I could watch one every
I'm not putting them
I
down.
used to watch one like every day for
I
like
I'll
years.
go through phases or watch two or three a night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
love them, but I
I
don't trust them.
No, I don't know how many documentary. Well, because you'll watch a movie that does a fake like the beginning of Blair Witch Project, and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel that far off from an actual documentary. And that's where it gets a little weird where you're like, "Oh, what's the difference between this and somebody claiming that the thing they're filming is real?"
Well, to tie this back in, I think there's a real documentarian aspect of Phantasm. Like seeing Michael Baldwin as this young actor that would eventually it's insane when you think about like this to most people, probably not himself, probably not his family, but this defines Michael Baldwin's life to most people.
Right.
Reggie Bannister, this changed his life. This made his career. Angus
Mhm.
Scrimm, it made him into an icon. And it's seeing them all as these young people in this small town that just love movies and are making a movie for the love of the craft. And it really does feel like that home movie aspect, just capturing a moment.
Yeah. Well, I guess to wrap up, we haven't been talking about him a lot, so let's end here because we've covered everything. I guess the big thing to talk about is the tall man, Angus Grimm.
Yeah.
Where do you put the tall man in horror movie villains, and or just movie villains? I guess. I guess limiting him to horror is almost unfair. And at the same
Yeah.
time, what's the effect of the tall man? Why was the tall man so? Because a lot of other characters, Mike Myers wears a mask. He's supernatural. Freddy Krueger's
Yeah.
burned. Michael Myers has the hockey mask in the Drowning Story. The tall man's just a I mean, he's an alien but he's just a guy throughout the
Yeah.
series. It's just this actor performing and saying like, "Boy," and yet it's so,
I think what it is,
iconic.
and it's really amazing. It's like John Waters, honestly, and this has a lot in common with John Waters Productions, is that Cost really happened to know this guy, who I think was a stage actor. I'm not sure, but I believe it was. That's why his name's Angus Scrimm and not Rory. His birth name's Rory, so that he wouldn't be found out for performing off campus doing these other productions. Um, and you listen to interviews with Angus Scrimm, he talks about Frankenstein a lot and Boris Karloff. I think that Don Cost really knew this dude who happened to understand universal classic horror performances, and he was able to emulate and give that with his own personality. And I really don't think it's coincidence that these actors all stayed together and made movies together. I don't think it's coincidence that Angus Scrimm wound up in, other Cost really productions like his Masters of Horror episode as a villain and all that. I think he really understood classic horror. And I think he was I'm guessing he was a stage actor who's probably very talented, probably very literate guy. He seems very intelligent in interviews. And I think that shines through in his performance.
Yeah, it's like an intelligent, stoic movie monster performance, which is what a lot of those Universal performances were.
Hmm.
It's what Lon Chaney Jr. could do, or Boris Karloff, and those kind
Yeah.
of actors and stuff like that. I do think it's comparable to those more than a lot of the other performances are. Like Freddy Krueger, I don't think of. I mean, it's one thing I love about
You said
Freddy, and
Vincent Price with Freddy, but even Vincent Price is kind of after those guys.
well, it's one thing I think is brilliant about what Wes Craven did. I think he created the modern movie monster that it's like
Yeah.
so horrifying that you can't even, go backwards. It can't be like you can't be like, oh, this is like I mean, there's German expressionism in Nightmare on Elm Street, but you can't be like, oh, this is like
Yeah.
a universal monster. It's like, well, nobody had really done anything like Freddy before Freddy. Freddy's a very original
Yeah.
thing to us, at least in film. I'm not saying it didn't exist in literature or some level like that. Um, but I do think the Tall Man, more than a lot of things that get the comparison, does is a throwback to a universal sort of
Yeah.
thing. The way he looks and stands. It's just that it's not, and I do think this movie would work in black and white, by the way. It's just that it's not shot in black and white. So it's limited sort of by the colors and what he could do with lighting on a low budget. And it's weird with this movie. There's some scenes that are gorgeous and then other scenes that look like shit. And it sort of jumps around like
It
that.
kind of adds to the movie in some weird way.
Yeah. It's fragmented like dreams and
Yeah.
your interpretation of
Yeah, no, that's a good
things.
point. It's like Picasso or something. It's like I
Yes.
always say the movie's impressionistic, but it
Hmm.
does have that Picasso quality as well.
Yeah, I think it's more interpretive than most horror films. I think most horror films are
Yeah.
fairly literal, but then they
Hmm.
have things about them that thematically are worth discussing. Like, what does Freddy mean when he says this is God? What is hell in this universe? What does Jason say about like motherhood and a lot of the stories are about like the
Yeah.
sins of parents or like generational. Even Michael Myers, it's a generational story. The tall man, as opposed to that, though, he's just a presence.
He's an
You know,
invader.
yes. Well, that's the thing that he is an alien, but most movies approach the alien or the creature from like this standpoint of they make it, just the fact that he's able to capture that. I guess almost like what's his name in The Day the Earth Stood Still, Klaatu,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
where it's just a guy, but he feels like an
Yeah.
alien. He feels off. There's a bit of that to this as well, where the tall man always feels supernatural. He always feels otherworldly, but it's literally just the actor. They don't really do much with special
No, they have him
effects.
like stand on a crate so he seems taller. That's about it.
Yeah, he's just tall, and
Oh,
he's
and like the finger thing, but like generally it's just the height.
yeah. That's really the one moment in the movie is the fingers, but for the most part, that's not like a like you would think that the movie would lean on special effects more because I
You know
think
what?
this franchise is thought of as a special effects heavy franchise, but this movie really isn't.
That's really that 2001 is what made him want to start making movies. You think the tall man and the framing of him, do you think that made him want to start making movies? You think the tall man and the framing of him, do you think that made him want to start making movies? You think the tall man and the framing of him, do you think that made him want to start making movies? You think the tall man and the framing of him, do you think that made him want to start making movies? You think the tall man and the framing of him, is emulative of the monolith, where it's
Yes.
like the monolith representing like, whatever it represents, but the tall man representing death is a
Mhm.
monolith of death and being larger than you, especially from a child's perspective.
Well, even the White Room, very 2001 when,
Yeah,
David's
for sure.
seeing the end of his life. I think a lot of people who had the impact on them with 2001, those filmmakers at the time, was that it's a film that deals with getting to the end of humanity, and instead of having a nihilistic message, which is where you think Stanley Kubrick would go as a filmmaker, it's more about transcendence.
Do you think that 2001 even traces like the timeline of a human life? Not just like an advancement, but like the apes being like teenager, like you're an animal, you're violent, you're aggressive, you're sexual. And then like the middle portion with, Michael and David and all that, or Hal and David and all that. Um, it's like your working life, you're working with technology, whatever, you're working for IBM. And then the end point is like the elderly stage of life.
Yeah, I do. I do think it's looking at life not just in a local sense, but in a universal sense, that this is the life
Yeah.
cycle of the universe, and you're
And
part
then
of the
ending with the
universe.
baby,
Yeah, that it's a
new
restart.
life almost.
Yeah, news, life, and evolution. I think that's a big part of it. And I think it had an impact on all these directors for that reason. I think they were all trying to capture the feeling that they get from that because they'd never experienced that feeling from a film. So I think Spielberg's trying to get there with Close Encounters. I think George Lucas. And it shows their different sensibilities. Like George Lucas clearly with Star Wars, it's like, okay, your sensibilities go to like comic books and serials and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And Spielberg's sensibilities go to, particularly with Close Encounters, which is like, he really goes to like an optimistic place where like, what if aliens were good? What if this was a experience that was so grand it was greater than your life on Earth? Cosarelli seems to look at the darker implications of these things in
Yeah.
2001. This isn't a nihilistic film. I don't think it has a nihilistic or cynical message,
No.
but it is a depressing film
It's
because
melancholy,
because
bittersweet even.
life itself is sort of a depressing, uh, disappointing experience a lot of the time.
I wonder how much this movie connected with me, like, on in that way of having a child as a focal point and having such a depressing view of life. 'Cause there was always like a offness growing up,
Right.
like an inevitability, a sadness, or just something
I
underlying
think
that
being
didn't
aware
quite.
I think being aware at a young
Yeah.
age, not just aware of what's going on, but aware of one's own death or one's own, the what happens to us,
Yeah.
and what happens to the people you care about, which kind of messes you up in life if you come to that clarity at young, because I think everybody comes to it eventually, but I think when
Yeah.
you deal with it young, and I think this is one of the only movies to really have a young character facing those things, and then it takes it to like the highest level because it does have like, I mean, one thing I love about this movie is that it's sort of an epic, grandiose thing, but it's contained into this like 90-minute genre movie.
Yeah. Well, to tie parts of this loose conversation together, with my first viewing, the person who took me to buy this movie, my grandmother, she's long gone, like I had mentioned, for over 15 years. And there's still moments where I have to remember that, where it feels like a bad dream that she's dead.
Well, yeah, and did the person? It's weird when people don't exist anymore because they
Yeah.
they only exist in the subconscious, and I think that's what Phantasm really is. I think
Or
it's
you have
this.
dreams where you see them
Yeah,
again, just like Mike seeing Jody again in his dream in the Phantasm.
yeah, it's about the subconscious existence versus reality. So it has childlike wonder where a child is able to view through the prism of that, while it's really the real things that are going on are very depressing, very dark, very realistic. But I honestly though I don't think those things come apparent until you've seen the movie several times, or maybe over the years of.
Maybe it's age.
Yeah, I do think it's age. I do think it's age. I think when you're young, you're scared of the tall man like Mike is. And
Yeah.
then I think as an adult, you feel messed up about the relationships in the movie, and that's another thing about it. There's nothing in this that implies like child molestation or something dark, but it is that kind of movie. If there was darker implications in there, it could get away with it. There are feelings inside of it that evoke very dark, depressing feelings about relationships you have with other people and
The
knowing who
scene
they
with
are.
the scene with Mike chasing after Jody, or even Mike, even though it's a kind of funny in a dated way, Mike watching Jody in the cemetery with the lady in lavender. Um, that sense of like being, and I don't have this. I'm the oldest sibling of my family. But I have a stepbrother who's older than me, of like chasing after someone who's aging faster than you, and they're going to sexuality or other things, and you're not there yet, and chasing after them, wanting that connection. Still, we were both still children. Um, that fear of losing someone to age, which is a form of mortality in and of itself. But also Jody, because there's that one guy. He's kind of an asshole. He just shows up to talk to give exposition where he's like, "Oh man, you got to take care of your younger brother because your parents died. That's a bad gig, man. If I was you, I'd just travel the country and fuck broads." And Jody's like, "Yeah, I'm planning to leave him. He's a good kid, but I got to hit the road." And it's like this beautiful montage, and that's where the bike scene comes in.
Right.
And like you sympathize with Jody because like you're a young man forced. It's very much like the Outsiders with the older brother who takes care of Pony Boy. It feels that way where it's like he's forced in this position of
Yeah, Patrick
responsibility.
Swayze could have played this role for sure. This is a
Yeah,
Patrick Swayze character.
but you sympathize and it's fucked up. And that's really how life works where like you get thrust in these positions you don't anticipate, you're not prepared for, but you just have to deal with.
Right, and then life is the only thing about it is that it keeps going forward, right? So,
Hmm.
you focus on feeling of things. So you either focus on the future that you're uncertain of, or you focus on the past, which you can't change. So
Yeah.
to be present, and I think this movie deals with that in a big way where the kid should be very present. He should be enjoying things in his life in the moment, which is a benefit of being young in a lot of ways because it becomes hard as you get
Yeah.
older. But it's a kid who's dealing with the existential crisis of not being able to overcome with the uncertainty of the past and not being able to cope with the mysteries of being older into the future and the
And the
nuances
inevitability of death.
and the inevitability of yes, because he becomes very
Well, I
aware
think
of death as a young age and he doesn't know how to process it.
that's what Reggie represents with his like kind of hippie thing, like the bald head and the ponytail. I know that's Reggie Banish, that's who he is as a human. But him being a musician, the tuning fork, it represents like when he's playing his guitar, and I think anyone who's played an instrument or even just enjoyed a song can attain to this. There's a level of being in the moment with music. Even philosophy like Nietzsche talks about like music being the music or music being the purpose of life in some ways, where music causes you to be in the moment. And I really think that it's not coincidence that they include Reggie as a songwriter in the movie, and he is a focal point. He is the one who crosses dimensions because I think that there's a real commentary about all these existential worries, these fears, and then you listen to your favorite song and you're just listening to a 3-minute song and enjoying it.
Well, we had this conversation recently where I was like, music is the god art form. I mean, anything else.
Hmm.
If you told me if movies didn't exist tomorrow, television shows, even books, which I think is a lot of information got transferred through society. If you told me like you were going to take music away, I mean, that's the number one because it conveys a whole life of
Yeah.
feeling in 3 minutes, where all those other things can't do that in 3 minutes. Maybe a really great paragraph or good prose in a book can do that. There's certainly that feeling can happen.
Yeah.
And
What's
sequences
it
in
goes down to like
movies,
quality. Like a good
yeah,
movie seems better than a bad book.
yeah, exactly. A good movie sequence can evoke that too. It could be about everything in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But music just has so much more. There's just so much more of it than those other things. It's overwhelming. That
Yeah.
do I have 1,000 books I like or 1,000 movies? I'm not sure. Do I have 1,000 songs that I love? Probably.
Easily.
Yeah, I think it's probably more than that, but if I was gonna, like, quantify it, it'd be, like, probably. So I agree, I think this is approached from a musical standpoint, even though it's not a musical, but in the same way that music evokes emotions from us and we don't totally understand why we feel the way we do from sounds, Phantasm is
Yeah.
doing that, with whatever elements he had around him at the time to make this movie, and the fact he's able to evoke these emotions over time. It could be a boring film, it could be an exciting film, it could be a scary film, it could be a drama. I've dealt with different emotions and times with this movie, but overall, I would say all of those things together is what makes it such a unique and powerful experience, and one that I keep with me overall this time. With a lot of other horror movies, I appreciate them. Like I really respect Halloween, and I really respect John Carpenter making it and what he did with it. This movie, I don't know if I could give you an objective reason why I think it's good or something. If I could break it down in those
Yeah.
terms, but uh, I've always just kind of felt something with it, and that's it's a movie about feeling as opposed to like an intellectual exercise in these things.
Yeah, it's always struck a chord to me in a way that most movies haven't. The best way I could sum this movie up and my final thoughts on it is that last time I watched it preparing for this episode, I thought, now excluding Jaws from this discussion, is watching it thinking, is this my favorite horror movie? And I count Jaws as a horror movie, but just it's just too good. You can't include it. It's cheating. Um, but it's just my personal favorite horror movie, and I rewatched it, and the last time I watched it was my best viewing experience of the movie, and I concluded thinking, I don't know. And I think that mystery, that flirtation, might be the best encapsulation of it, where it's like, is this the best thing ever? Maybe.
Yeah, uh, there's a lot of maybe with Phantasm. It's a that's a good way to sum it up. All right, well, I think we summed up pretty well. Okay, we did 4 movies. This doesn't mean that we're not gonna do a horror movie again in the rotation that isn't Halloween themed. We just picked movies that I think are good movies to watch during Halloween. Or like even Rob Zombie's Halloween, I think would be a fun watch in a certain context in October. And
On opposite day.
well, a lot of movies, you could because I think we could talk about Nightmare on Elm Street and other thing like that. I think the reason I kind of went in on Phantasm is that because it's not necessarily the immediate
It's
conventional.
counterintuitive.
Yeah, totally. And that's I think where these themes are going to go with these monthly threads, kind of in episodes where we end up and all that. But this doesn't mean we're not going to talk about horror things. But I am kind of glad we're going to transition out of. Because while it was so exciting at the beginning of this month, the Scooby Doo, as October's wrapping up this
Yeah,
year, I'm just kind of like, okay, let's get the fuck over with this. Let's move on.
same.
This
Well,
clearly isn't going to be a 10 out of 10 Halloween.
I don't want to. Yeah, I had today kind of solidified that for me, but that's beside the point. Spoiler alert, I don't want to give away future episodes, but I have to for one. I'm just so excited. We're going to be reviewing Benny in June next week. Watch out for it.
That's gotta be one of your most hated movies of all time. I can't think of a movie. If you asked me and I had never heard your opinion on it, what movie would Chad hate? I'd be like Benny and June.
It's not a Chad movie.
Even if he hasn't seen it, he hates it.
You don't lift weights to that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I give this 10 full body workouts out of 10, I think it's
Yeah,
like you do the 3 set, you do the Monday, Wednesday, Friday full body workout just to do like, an overall mass
yeah.
build
No
with the
rest
comp.
days.
Yeah,
Phantasm.
your rest days are ab workouts and calf raises, those
Yeah.
extra muscles. But yeah, I think this was a really it kind of went against the grain of the show. We got a little bit more, but I can't talk about this movie and not get depressed. Not depressed, but kind of deal with it in a serious way. I can't really make fun of this movie.
It's not appropriate.
Yeah,
Like
I
there's
don't.
individual moments like Mike with a lollipop awkwardly or
Yeah,
hot as love and all that, but it's it's just not and it almost feels like mocking death itself.
Yeah, it's a very serious film. I think he takes the subject matter very seriously.
It feels like Seventh Seal in an odd like the scene of them dancing specifically
Mhm.
and the tall man and like the image of death. For me personally, I would say it'd be like making fun of Seventh Seal, and I just don't think that's acceptable.
No, when movies are dealing with actual, because a lot of times people give meaning to movies or things that don't, I think, have that seriousness, and I'm like, "Come on."
But
You
dude, you're
know?
just gonna make fun of the Babadook?
Yeah,
Fucking Babadook?
exactly. But this film actually, it's like, yeah, am I gonna mock death? I'm not brave enough to do that.
Yeah.
I don't laugh at it. It's like, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty scary."
Yeah,
Uh
you laugh in that way where it's like you don't know how else to react, so you kind of laugh nervously.
but yeah, we're done with this. We're gonna start rotating into the next month with, I don't know exactly what our next episode is. I think I know what it's gonna be. But we're gonna try to start bringing guests in now and start. I'd say maybe one episode out of the month we'll probably rotate a guest in. Would probably be the way to go about it, and have them talk about movies that they're gonna like. Because a lot of this is sort of just about your feelings about movies instead of trying to be nitpicky, which is what I don't like about a lot of modern criticism.
Yeah.
Or the other way where you would just add thematic stuff that's bullshit as opposed to just being like, "Hey, this is my personal interpretation, whatever, and that's what I'm talking about."
Cinema sins or video essays. It's like those are the two extremes. That's like the horseshoe theory of
Ex
modern film criticism.
exactly, the over edited, over serious video essay that's an emotional, like, manipulating and overwrought experience to make you at the end be like, "Wow, Jesus, this is the power," even though they don't really say anything in most of them and 99% of them,
Yeah.
or the cinema sins where it's like, every 30 seconds, there's a problem in this movie, and you're supposed to go, "Ha ha ha, I'm smarter than this."
Yeah, that's what I hate about it. It's the ego feeding. It's critic. It's beta.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with cinema chads, and this is a serious statement, is that it takes confidence, it takes bravery to make something. But to be a critic, to sit back and mock others who are trying, while you yourself are too big of a pussy to put your own work forth, I think that's pathetic.
Well, I never like to view myself as a critic. I like to see myself as a unsuccessful artist who is interpreting other people's art. Um, and is willing to have conversations with them. Like if they were to discuss these things with me, I'd be interested in their answers to these questions. I'm coming from that
Yeah,
perspective as opposed to I'm above it.
exactly. Well,
You
that's
know.
a critic stance now. Is like, oh, I would never make something this bad. I would never make anything because I'm too perfect. But if I did, it'd be A
Well,
plus.
we made stuff that was worse than most of the stuff we've talked about. Like Rob Zombie's Halloween's bad, but I'm sure we've made something worse than that.
We've probably, yeah, at some point.
Yeah, I'm not like proud of the thing. I mean, I've done things I'm proud of, but it's not like, I mean, there's probably
Yeah,
10 of them as opposed to 1,000 things that I think are
I
bad.
I've done things I'm proud of, but never on camera.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. It's weird with our ear.
I have a pretty good text tape. Give myself that.
Well, with art, it's like the things that it's so weird. The things that often like you dig a lot aren't the things that translate, and then
For
uh,
sure, like the things you enjoy as a viewer, and I've learned this the hard way. What
yeah,
you enjoy watching or reading or listening to may not be what you're good at making.
yeah. Yeah, you think I wanna be this person, and then you're not that, then you have to realize that you're this kind of person. Well, I saw this quote once where someone said, "Life isn't sometimes you have to do things that you hate, and that's what you thrive in."
Yeah.
And that's true. It's weird, the things that you find that
Yeah.
you have success in, you're like, "Well, I don't wanna be that kind of person."
That's what my
Uh
father said about my mother. Explaining like my me and my brother's birth. He's like, sometimes you have to do something you hate, but you thrive in it.
All right, man. Thank you for being on here with me again in episode 4.
Sure thing.
This was a fun thing doing the Halloween thing. I'm hoping we can we're still doing the podcast next year and we do this again in October.
Yeah.
I'm scared by next year we'll be like, I'm too tired. I don't want to do it anymore. But I'll say this: the beer helped. It loosened me the
Yeah, it
fuck
always
up.
helps.
Yeah, no,
I,
it's
I just
like,
want to say this much before the episode ends. November, we're coming for you.
all right, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so you can get updated on weekly episodes. We do this weekly, except if there's obviously like a bye week, like a fucking football team or some shit. But I want to try to do at least 4 a month, and please give something in that donation. You don't have to, but if you just even gave us a little bit of money, it would help to keep the show going. So,
And
whatever.
another thing, if you're subscribed to other channels, if you're subscribed to Red Letter Media, James Rolfe, Cinemassacre, whatever, unsubscribe. It's not enough. Oh, you're gonna subscribe? You think we appreciate that? You think we give a fuck? No. Get rid of those other pussies.
Fuck them.
This is Chad Town.
Well, sorry, those guys are past their prime. I mean this honestly. This isn't even fucking being joking. I'm like, fuck it.
I
Like,
was joking.
yeah, you think like Red Letter Media peaked like a decade ago, and like,
I'm sorry, Red Letter Media peaked in like 2012.
yeah,
I'm
like
sick of pretending like they peaked in 2018. Like I followed them since high school.
I think they
They peaked
maybe
in
I think in
like
2018 maybe they peaked in like their popular and mainstream appeal, like
yes.
everybody knowing who
With
they
that
were.
said, they're probably great dudes. If I knew them,
Oh,
like if they were my coworkers,
are
they'd
you
probably be
kidding?
great dudes.
Are you kidding? Yeah, to hang out with
I feel
them.
bad
Yeah.
talking shit, but like if
No.
they lived in this area, they'd be like my best friends.
Yeah, we're basically Milwaukee guys. We just don't live there. I mean, I get their
Yeah.
energy.
Same with James Rolfe. Like he's probably a great guy.
Totally, no doubt. But they're best of prime. You know, we're in our peak, which is a shittier version of their peak. But follow the chats right now while we're dealing with their stuff until we become old hacks like them. We're just
Yes.
not there yet. Success hasn't let us be hacks because to have a downfall, you have to have success.
Right now we're just plateauing
Yeah.
right at the bottom.
Yeah, we're just staying at this level. It's like, maybe we should be a little bit better. No. Let's
Well, we're
just
not getting
stay.
worse technically.
That's true. I mean, if you compare this to stuff we were doing 10 years ago, I guess. We're,
And lots of people are.
I'd like to say we're more mature, but we're not that much more mature either.
Oh,
I thought I'd be much more of an adult by this point in my life. I thought I'd be like, well, one day I'm
yeah.
going to be that sophisticated guy. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Nope. I don't even own a suit.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
rented one for that other episode, full disclosure.
yeah. Can I get a suit? What is this for a wedding or something? No, I'm doing a podcast.
I'm reviewing Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Oh, here you go. Free of charge. You're doing God's work, son.
Run home, boy.
He pat you on the head. He rubbed your hair. Thank you, mister. Run home and don't let anyone stop you. You're running home with this suit.
Rob Zombie stops me.
Yeah. How much for that suit, boy? He has a stick.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
he trips me with this stick.
You think I don't know what you're doing, zombie? I've seen your movies. But yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Cinema Chads. This is Chad, and this is Chad,
Dad.
and hopefully, I like that. I think we kind of captured with the beer too. I'm drinking like a pretentious beer, and you have the blue collar beer with Budweiser. The beers represented Phantasm.
Yeah.
Maybe the next movie, we can try to think what beer best represents the movie.
Yeah. Next episode, we're gonna be sipping some fancy wine.
Yeah, if it's a movie I think we're gonna talk about, if I think this is a depressing movie, the next one's like the next one like this one I could sit back and talk about. The next one legitimately like fucks me up.
I'll put it this way. The next movie, separate your gun from the ammo. Because you're not gonna want the gun loaded that night. Because you're gonna get too depressed.